Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a world no one mentions in guidebooks or fairy tales, the hushed corridors and shadowed chambers of Henry VIII's Tudor England's royal court. If you think your wits could navigate candlelit galleries where every footstep echoes with ambition and every whispered compliment might mask a dagger, think again. By the end of this journey, you'll understand exactly why you wouldn't survive one day in this labyrinth of power and protocol. We'll rise before dawn in a cramped suite near Greenwich's riverbank, feel the hush of priests' vestments brushing chapel stones, and catch the faint scent of damp velvet and wax drippings as courtiers line up for the king's nod. So if you're curious, or a little braver than most, hit like and subscribe, but only if you're ready for a slow, immersive history that soothes even as it unsettles. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what the hour is in your corner of the world. I love sharing these moonlit moments with you. Now, settle in. Let the quiet hum of your fan become part of the tale. Take a deep breath and imagine the cool weight of fur-lined gowns, the distant murmur of trumpets at first light, and the gentle scrape of quills across parchment. This isn't a tale of battlefield glory or courtly banquets at ease. It's the raw reality of survival, when every gesture, every word, could seal your fate. Dim your lights, exhale your day's worries, and join me as we discover why one day in Tudor England's royal court would be your last. In the hush before first light, you find yourself standing beside Thomas Cromwell's humble prie-dieu, its carved oak surface worn smooth by years of whispered petitions. The low ceiling presses in, wooden beams darkened by soot and shadow, and the only illumination comes from the faintest ribbon of dawn slipping beneath narrow casement windows. The room smells of cold stone, perhaps the river mist that drifts up from the Thames overnight, and the faint, almost forgotten trace of yesterday's tallow candles, snuffed hours ago but leaving their smoky echo in the air. Cromwell's doublet lies folded on a nearby chair, dark as a raven's wing, yet softened at the elbows from constant wear. He kneels now, calloused fingertips brushing across the surface of yellowed parchment stacked before him. Each sheet holds the weight of kingdoms, proclamations sealed with the royal signet, papal dispensations that grant Henry privileges once unimagined, and letters from distant ambassadors, some earnest, some laced with flattery, a few edged with threat. He unfolds the top document with deliberate care, the parchment crackling like dried leaves. As he smooths its surface, golden seal intact, the flourish of the king's own hand catches the first pale light, glinting like a promise. Beneath it, lines of Latin script coil and dance, each stroke a potential turning point in the delicate balance of power. You imagine the ink still fresh when it left the scribe's quill, the tiny iron particles whispering secrets of rebellion or favor as they settle into the parchment's grain. With a slow exhale, Cromwell's fingertip follows a particularly ornate ligature, a sweeping, looping curl that denotes the clause granting the dissolution of a small northern priory. His eyebrow lifts ever so slightly, as if amused by the flourish itself, that subtle hint of sarcasm. Who knew ecclesiastical law could be so decorative? Yet he offers no outward sign of amusement, only the soft murmur of words on his lips, a silent litany of caution against pride and presumption. The ambient silence is punctuated only by the distant drip of condensation from roof timbers, an errant echo like a metronome marking the passage of time. Each pause invites reflection. What ripple will these words send through the kingdom? Will the local populace mourn the monks displaced by reform, or will they cheer the king's justice? Cromwell knows both outcomes are possible, and neither without consequence. He turns the page with a gentle curl of his fingers. Here, an instruction from Rome grants Henry a dispensation to wed Anne Boleyn. A document brimming with theological nuance, the kind of arcane detail that would leave lesser men trembling. Cromwell inhales, the scent of old vellum sharp in his nostrils. A soft smile tugs at the corner of his mouth, a nearly imperceptible quirk that suggests he relishes the puzzle of it all. After all, only he could translate God's decree into political capital. As the first sliver of sunrise slips past the mullion bars, painting the room in a wash of pale amber, Cromwell bows his head. You hear the creak of his leather jerkin against polished oak, and the faint rustle of parchment edges shifting under his hand. His final gesture is a hushed plea, wisdom to navigate these tangled edicts, mercy for missteps he is yet to commit. The words themselves remain locked in his mind, their cadence too intimate for any but the listener's ear. When at last he rises, shoulders squared against the chill, the parchments folded and sealed once more, the chamber seems to exhale with him. In this quiet dawn ritual, so measured, so meticulous, lies the hidden heartbeat of the Tudor court. One more breath, one more prayer, and Thomas Cromwell steps away from the prie-dieu to face a world where parchment and prayer hold more power than sword or crown. In the quiet aftermath of his morning devotions, the chamber's stillness is broken by a hesitant shuffle and the soft scrape of wooden sandals, a sound that in this hushed suite feels as loud as thunder rolling across distant hills. The door creaks on ancient hinges, and in slips the steward, a man of narrow shoulders and anxious eyes, his doublet slightly rumpled as though he left the vestibule in too great a hurry. He clutches a thick ledger bound in cracked, oil-dark leather, its cover stiff with age and countless hours of fire-lit scrutiny. You might notice how the room seems to shrink as he edges forward, the air growing heavier with each tentative step. The steward's breath catches in his throat, perhaps from the cold, damp air that seeps through the river-facing wall, or perhaps from the gravity of the task he bears. When he lays the ledger on the narrow table beside Cromwell's prie-dieu, the thud of its weight sends a small tremor through the floorboards, as though the building itself is bracing for the contents within. Cromwell remains seated, hands folded, as the steward straightens and clears his throat. The muted light from the single arched window glances off the ledger's brass clasps, illuminating smudges of ink that have bled through the centuries. Slowly, Cromwell reaches out, fingertips grazing the worn leather before lifting the cover. The pages inside are a mottled tapestry of numbers and annotations, rows of figures that, on closer inspection, reveal demands for fresh levies in Ireland, unpaid subsidies for garrison upkeep, and the king's ever-increasing appetite for gold. As Cromwell's eyes drift across the columns, you sense the ledger's pull, the way it seems to hum with obligation. Under the pale glow of morning, each inked numeral stands out sharply. 200 men, £500, immediate dispatch. His chest tightens as he calculates the human and financial cost, the sudden ache a reminder that policy and people are bound by the same ledger lines. Yet he speaks no word of alarm. Instead, he leans back slightly, letting the calm of practiced restraint wash over him like a cool breeze. You might notice a flicker of impatience in the steward's stooped posture. After all, delivering dire news is no one's favourite task. He shifts from one foot to the other, anxious to see a reaction that might soften the blow. But Cromwell offers only a slight incline of the head, as though acknowledging a trivial weather report rather than an urgent summons for soldiers and silver. There's a certain art to this composure, a measured nod that neither dismisses the steward's effort nor betrays the magnitude of the crisis. With deliberate slowness, Cromwell closes the ledger, the leather cover settling with a soft sigh. He tucks it neatly beneath his arm, careful not to jostle its contents. Like a parent cradling a restless child, the steward stands waiting, eyes flicking between Cromwell's face and the ledgers peeking from beneath the minister's arm. Finally, Cromwell's lips part in a voice, as even and unhurried as a tranquil stream. "Thank you," he says, each syllable weightless yet clear. "We shall consider these demands and provide our answer shortly." There's a subtle warmth in his tone, a hint of reassurance that suggests he sees beyond columns of debt and the spectre of revolt. The steward exhales, a soft sound of relief and enduring worry, and retreats as quietly as he arrived, leaving Cromwell alone once more with the silent chamber. In the lingering hush, the ledger's presence still resonates. You might imagine the heft of its pages against Cromwell's arm as he rises, straightening the fur-lined collar of his gown. Each step away from the table is taken with purpose, the soft scrape of his own leather shoes a gentle counterpoint to the earlier sandals. In this moment, the world beyond the chamber doors seems to hold its breath, waiting for the minister to translate these grim numbers into policy, and perhaps to stave off the storm that lies beyond. In the soft glow of early dawn, the chamber stirs again. The hush after prayer gives way to a subtle murmur, the gentle shuffle of feet on wooden floorboards, the barely audible rustle of fabric, and the occasional soft click of buckles being tested. Cromwell stands before a tall, narrow mirror set into the panelled wall, his silhouette framed by the pale light filtering through the mullioned window. His doublet lies in neat folds on a cushioned stool nearby, and he watches calm, composed, as his servants begin their careful work. A footman steps forward first, bearing a heavy, ebony-hued doublet, lined with black velvet and trimmed sparingly with fur. The rich fabric whispers through the air like a secret as it unfolds. The servant's fingers, deft and unhurried, slip the garment over Cromwell's shoulders. You can almost feel the cool heft of the material settling around his torso, each seam pressed into place by precise, practiced hands. The doublet's cut is plain, far less ostentatious than many at court, but its weight carries its own quiet dignity. Next comes the velveteen breeches, dark as midnight, yet softer to the touch than shadows. Two attendants work in unison. One lifts Cromwell's leg with discreet care, while the other pulls the breeches into position, tucking and straightening until every stitch lies smooth. The room seems to exhale with relief at the absence of wrinkles. There is a gentle humour in the scenario. One might imagine badges of office stitched into the very fabric, marking the wearer as both servant to the king and master of circumstance. A small pile of shirts sits nearby, each linen layer starched and pristine. A maid approaches with the innermost garment, its sleeves folded like gentle waves of cloud. She helps Cromwell slip his arms through, the cool linen whispering against his skin. He flexes the fabric-covered arms, testing the range of motion as if greeting an old friend. His fingers, still stained faintly with ink from the morning's parchments, press momentarily against the shirt's crisp collar, before it is deftly fastened at the throat. Now comes the chain of office. A simple gold link, looped through ornate clasps that glint like captive fireflies. The servant drapes it around Cromwell's neck, the cool metal sliding against the shirt collar with a soft, deliberate click. The links are unadorned but gleam with a subtle warmth, as if each link carries a promise or a warning, reminders that power is a burden, as much as a privilege. He lets it rest, just so, the chain settling against the velvet, a single emblem of rank that speaks volumes without a single word. At last, the final flourish, the fur-lined collar. 2 pages lift an oversized mantle of soft ermine, its edges tipped in coal black. The fur is cool and whisper-light as it brushes across Cromwell's shoulders. You might imagine how the scent of fur, earthy, almost animalistic, mixes with the lingering aroma of damp stone and ink. The mantle settles around his neck like a silent sentinel, the fur's weight a reassuring presence. It frames his face, pushing back any stray tendrils of hair, and gives him an austere silhouette against the muted oak panelling. Cromwell lifts his chin ever so slightly, and examines himself in the mirror. He straightens a crease at his elbow, then smooths a faint wrinkle at his side. In this measured choreography, garment by garment, detail by detail, lies the unspoken truth of life at court. Appearance is not mere vanity, but the first act in an unending performance. A single misaligned seam or a slack collar might invite a scornful glance, or a subtle snub, the sort that can ripple into exile or disgrace. His final act is a small, almost imperceptible nod to the servants, a gesture of gratitude that carries no hurry. They withdraw silently, leaving him alone in the half-light, the chamber now imbued with the quiet dignity of a man prepared for his day. The heavy velvet and soft fur, the crisp linen and polished gold, all have found their place, snug and correct. Cromwell flexes his fingers once more, this time testing the chain's weight, then turns away from the mirror, shoulders squared, gaze steady. In this room, among these garments, the minister is both made and revealed. He steps toward the door, each footfall measured, the hush returning in his wake. Outside awaits the hall of courtiers, the first audience with the king, and a world where every aspect of his being, from the fabric on his back to the chain round his neck, must serve the delicate art of survival. You step into the courtyard just as the pale dawn light softens the stone flagging. Around you, a living tapestry unfolds. The deep scarlet cloaks of the king's guard, their capes brushing the ground like silken whispers. The glossy damask of foreign ambassadors, each bolt of fabric catching stray beams of sun. Velvet caps perched atop noble heads, flaunting tall ostrich plumes that sway with imperceptible grace. Even the air seems richer here, humming with anticipation and the faint, musky scent of horses fresh from their stables. A sudden fanfare erupts. Trumpets call out in bold, confident blasts, their notes arcing across the courtyard like gleaming arrows. The heralds' voices follow, booming in unison. Thomas Cromwell, King's principal secretary, their proclamation rolls through the rippling colours, a reminder that every name and title is a carefully placed piece on this living chessboard. You sense the vibrations underfoot, as if the stones themselves acknowledge the parade's importance. Cromwell moves forward, each step measured, the soles of his leather shoes whispering against the cool flagstones. His head is bowed just enough to evade the keen gaze of the Duke of Norfolk, an unspoken acknowledgement that ambition lurks everywhere. Yet there's a subtle lift at the crown of his brow, a faint tilt that signals, I too belong. Less practiced courtiers shift aside, their eyes flicking toward his chain of office glinting like captured sunlight. Heads turn as he passes. Some offer curt nods, others hold their breath, gauging his stride for signs of favour or faltering. A young page stifles a yawn behind Cromwell's shoulder, perhaps more concerned with the chill in the morning air than the pageantry. But he straightens at the sight of the minister's unhurried poise, as though rising to meet the court's quiet gravity. You might notice how the colours swirl around Cromwell, like gentle waves in a kaleidoscope. The scarlet of the guards contrasts sharply with the deep greens, purples and ceruleans of visiting envoys. Each cloak is edged with fur or trimmed in gold, a subtle boast of wealth and connection. The very atmosphere is charged with silent competition. My coat is finer than yours, my plume reaches higher, my favour is more steadfast. In this moment attire is argument, and silence is strategy. A herald strides past, trailing a banner emblazoned with the royal arms, its fabric fluttering like a giant, muted flag. The scent of damp wool and fresh embroidery mingles in the air, lending a curious comfort to the proceedings. Even the mist rising from the nearby river seems to pause, coalescing into shifting veils that frame the assembled courtiers. As Cromwell threads his way through the ranks, you become aware of the delicate choreography, a slight sideways step to allow a peer's passage, the soft intake of breath as a foreign prince regards his neighbour's gold chain, the almost imperceptible shuffle when a servant hurries past with a leather pouch of letters. Each movement is an unspoken line in a larger conversation, one where eyes speak as loudly as voices, and where the smallest gesture is loaded with meaning. At the far end of the courtyard, the courtiers converge before the chapel's heavy doors, their ornate hinges gleaming. Cromwell's pace does not quicken. Instead, it remains a steady metronome, guiding him forward. In his mind, he catalogues each face, each cloak, each glint of blade or braid of ribbon, all threads in the tapestry of favour he must navigate. And then, as if on cue, the trumpets fall silent. The heralds lower their banners, and a hush settles over the courtyard, broken only by the soft rustle of fabric and the distant clip-clop of horses. Cromwell pauses, head inclined in acknowledgement of the king's upcoming arrival. For a moment, time lingers on this tableau of loyalty and livery, where colour and costume meet quiet resolve. You, standing in the midst of it, feel the gentle weight of royal favour pressing down like a velvet cloak draped across your shoulders. Here, in this swirl of pageantry, every polished boot and every muted plume whispers the same truth: you are present by grace alone, and that grace can shift with a single breath. Inside the chapel's vaulted nave, the world feels hushed, as though the very stones have softened their edges in reverence. Pale morning light filters through towering stained glass panels, each pane a mosaic of saints, angels and martyrs caught in mid-gesture, hands raised in blessing, faces tilted toward heaven. The colours bleed together in gentle pools of ruby, sapphire and emerald that dance across flagstones worn smooth by centuries of devout footsteps. A tendril of incense curls upward from a brazen censer swung by a novice in simple surplice. The sweet, woody aroma mingles with the smoky tang of torches set in iron sconces along the walls, creating a scent both exotic and familiar, as though memory and ritual have been distilled into a single lingering breath. You might feel the heat of the flames against your cheek, or notice the way the smoke coils around your senses like a soft veil. Cromwell enters at the back, his polished boots whispering on the cold stone. He settles into a pew just behind archbishops in resplendent vestments, and earls, whose embroidered cloaks brush against one another with polite rustles. The air here is cool, but beneath it you sense the warmth of so many gathered prayers, an invisible tide that lifts the hush into a living rhythm. Soft Latin intonations arise, voices melding in gentle waves. Dominus vobiscum. The words echo, barely touching the ribs of the nave before receding into silence. Cromwell's lips move in tandem with the congregation's responses. Not quite loud enough to disturb the holy quiet, but precise enough that a wayward syllable might mark him as inattentive. He inhales slowly, as though tasting each phrase, then dissolves into the chant. His gaze drifts down the row. First, the archbishop closest to the altar, bowed so deeply his mitre almost brushes the floor, a gesture of humility or perhaps of fierce piety. Next to him, an earl who stands throughout, arms folded across his chest, jaw set with determination, either devotion or stubbornness, Cromwell muses, and you might too. A soft smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. Here, even posture is political. The nave is alive with subtle motion. A clerk shifts in his seat, sleeves brushing the pew ahead. A Spanish envoy straightens his collar to catch a shard of light that glints off his gold-embroidered cuffs. Every breath, every faint creak of wood is part of an unspoken dialogue. Who here prays with genuine faith, and who treats this mass as another stage in the endless theatre of court? Candles flicker at the altar's edge, their flames reflected 1,000 times in polished brass. The priest's voice rises as he elevates the host, a small pale wafer held aloft like a promise. The congregation bows, and for a moment the chapel feels suspended, weightless as if the world outside has melted away. Even the distant drip of water seeping through the roof timbers seems hushed in deference. When the priest intones the consecration, it reverberates through the rafters, a gentle rumble that resonates in the chest rather than the ears. Cromwell straightens, his spine aligning with the nave's columns, and you become aware of the faint swell of his chest as he breathes. Inhale hope, exhale doubt. That might be the unspoken mantra here. As the service proceeds, incense smoke swirls into sunbeams, forming fleeting halos around each worshipper. The sanctuary feels at once ancient and immediate, a space where history and the day's concerns intertwine. Cromwell's eyes flick again, noting idle hands, nervous glances, and fervent bows. Each tells a story: desire for favor, dread of judgment, or perhaps simple reverence. He catalogues these with the ease of someone who has spent years reading people's souls as deftly as they read their prayers. A gentle hush falls as the mass concludes. The final Ite Missa Est drifts through the nave, and torches are lowered in silent ritual. Steam rises from the brass censers, an exhalation as if the chapel itself is sighing. Cromwell bows his head once, a quiet gesture of thanks or perhaps a vow of continued vigilance, then rises with the congregation. As you follow him out through the play of coloured light and whispered echoes, you carry the calm of the chapel with you. The path ahead may be paved with intrigue, but for this moment, the hush remains, a gentle reminder that even in the heart of power, silence can be the most formidable presence of all. As the priest's voice fades on the final syllable of Dominus Vobiscum, the chapel holds its breath. The chanting ceases, and in that pregnant pause, the hush deepens, so complete it feels as though the very air has gathered itself like a velvet curtain, ready to fall. Then, from his ornate stall at the front, Henry VIII rises. The movement is deliberate, regal. The heavy folds of his crimson robes shift with a muted whisper, the fur-lined collar brushing smoothly against the carved oak rail. He straightens, back ramrod straight, shoulders squared under the vaulted ceiling. A bead of candle wax drips from a nearby sconce, but no one notices. All eyes are drawn to the king. In that instant, time seems to subtly tip on its axis. You become acutely aware of the faint scent of sweat mingling with incense, a reminder that even monarchs are made of breath and blood. The flicker of torchlight dances across Henry's profile, illuminating the fine lines around his eyes, a testament to years of triumphs and trials. His gaze traverses the pews, as easy and unhurried as wind drifting across fields. Then comes the nod. It is almost imperceptible, a slight inclination of the head, yet it carries the weight of empires. In that single movement, Henry communicates volumes, favour, tolerance, or measured distance. It is not a gesture of warmth or affection. It is the sovereign's economical grace, precise and exacting. You sense its force like a current pulling silently beneath the surface of the water. Cromwell stands amid the assembly, his chest tightening as if grasped by invisible fingers. You can almost feel the pressure, that tightening coil of expectation and relief. For a heartbeat, his world contracts to that nod alone. Friend or foe, grace or disgrace, reward or rebuke, there is no middle ground. In the soft echo of the king's motion, every courtier holds their breath, locked in suspense. You might hear a distant shuffle, the soft click of a gauntlet settling, the discreet clearing of a throat, as each noble measures their own standing. A stray sunbeam catches the gilded edge of Cromwell's chain of office, gleaming momentarily like a beacon. In that shimmer you glimpse the fragile brilliance of royal favour, radiant, yet as fleeting as morning mist. Cromwell bows his head, a gesture so practiced it seems almost automatic. Yet beneath that composed incline, his heart flutters, a bird caught in a gentle breeze. It is an intimate moment, shared in stillness between man and monarch, witnessed by the silent walls of the chapel. He absorbs every detail, the soft exhalation of breath as the king's lips part, the faint furrow of an eyebrow, the whisper of fabric, as Henry turns to sit. In the gathered quiet that follows, the chapel seems to press closer, as though leaning in to witness what will come next. The candle flames settle back into steady glow, and the stained glass fractures the light into muted rainbows on the cold stone. Courtiers shift in their pews, breaking the spell with subtle movements. A sleeve brushing velvet, a boot tapping against the floor. Cromwell allows himself a measured exhale, the air escaping in a soft sigh that mingles with the lingering notes of incense. He rises fully, shoulders squared, eyes forward, carrying within him the memory of that nod. Everything hinges on that quiet exchange. The path ahead, the battles to be waged in council chambers, the alliances to be forged over whispered confidences. As you follow Cromwell's steady footsteps toward the chapel door, the memory of the king's first word, though unspoken, lingers like a gentle echo. It is a reminder that here in this world of velvet and ritual, power speaks in gestures rather than shouts, and for those who listen closely, the faintest movement can carry them forward, or bend them to their knees. You cross the threshold into the Privy Council chamber, and immediately feel the air shift, thicker, charged with whispered ambition. The walls, panelled in dark oak, seem to absorb the lantern light, their glossy surfaces reflecting flickers of flame like distant stars. Each panel bears the faintest smudge of history, tiny indentations from hastily scrawled notes, the occasional drip of spilled wine that hardened into a dark rivulet down the grain. In one corner, the Duke of Norfolk looms like a veteran oak, his heavy breathing the only punctuation in the quiet murmur. You sense the rise and fall of each breath as he consults a folded parchment, weighing the merits of fresh troops for another French campaign. Across the room, Thomas Cromwell is a study in scholarly precision, hunched over a stack of theological treatises, quill in hand, lips moving beneath powdered hair as he debates. In whispers only he can hear the finer points of communion. Between them, Sir Thomas More sits rigidly, his hawkish gaze sweeping the chamber like a sentinel. You almost imagine the rustle of his scholar's robe sounding an unseen alarm whenever a too bold proposal edges toward heresy. The chamber's long table stretches before you, its scarred surface a map of past conflicts. Ink blots the size of coins still glisten, where spilt quills met parchment in heated debate. Ring-shaped watermarks hint at hurried cups of ale, or wine consumed in restless anticipation. You run your gaze along its length. Here, a gouge from a dropped dagger. There, a faint scorch marking where an overzealous lantern was half tilted in the dark. Each imperfection is a testament to the weight these discussions carry. Cromwell steps forward with deliberate calm, his polished boots whispering against the worn flags underfoot. He seats himself in a carved oak chair that bears the monogram HR under its leather cushion. Henry Rex, a silent reminder of who truly presides, as he lowers himself into the row of arms. The chair creaks in recognition of his frequent occupancy. He places both hands on the table, fingertips brushing the cool wood, drawing strength or perhaps comfort from its centuries-old solidity. Above the table, a cluster of iron lanterns swings gently, sending arches of light that stutter across faces. Shadows dance behind closed eyelids as each councillor leans in, posture betraying their priorities. Norfolk's broad shoulders hunch forward in eager readiness, while Cranmer straightens, as though each theological nuance might tip the balance of power. More sits statuesque, his hands folded neatly before him, eyes sharp enough to cut through half-truths. The first whispered exchange reaches your ear. Talk of war with France, of fresh levies that must be drawn from a treasury already stretched thin. You almost taste the metallic tang of coin gold and silver traded for promises of glory that may never materialize. Then comes the matter of church lands. Should monasteries in the north be dissolved to fill the royal coffers? The notion hangs in the air like a summer thundercloud full of promise for revenue, but heavy with the threat of unrest among dispossessed monks and peasants. A servant glides in with a small tankard of water and a thin slice of bread, simple fare amid the chamber's grand designs. Cromwell nods in acknowledgement, as though accepting the rations of power itself. The bread's dry crumb crackles softly against his teeth, and the water's cool clarity seems to wash away, if only for a moment, the swirling concerns of policy and politics. A cough interrupts Norfolk, clearing his throat, perhaps to remind the assembly that his voice still bears weight. Cranmer glances up from his manuscripts, ink-flecked fingers smudged at the tips. Moore tilts his head, lips pursed, as if tasting an argument before granting it passage. Here, silence is not absence, but expectation. Each pause allows the chamber to lean further into its own tension, to catalogue every detail of breath, every twitch of an eye. Cromwell unfolds a new parchment, this one marked with the King's seal, edges crisp and unyielding. He scans the demand for additional funds to quell dissent in Cambridge, the word dissent itself ringing with quiet accusation. You sense the gravity in his measured nod, the way his jaw sets for what will be a carefully crafted response. And then, as if by unspoken agreement, the gathering shifts. Lanterns sway, light steadies, and voices tentatively rise. Policies will be drawn, alliances forged, and maybe, if luck holds, the weight of consequence will be borne by others. But in these first measured moments, this gathering storm, you have witnessed the alchemy of power. Ideas distilled into decrees, hopes transmuted into edicts, and ambition distilled into the quiet rustle of parchment on polished wood. When the pale glow of lantern light steadies over the long council table, the matter at hand is announced. The dissolution of a small priory in the rugged north, an institution cherished by local families, yet deemed redundant by the Crown. The words barely leave the clerk's lips before Thomas Cromwell leans forward, the soft creak of his chair blending seamlessly with the chamber's hush. He inhales the oak-scented air, spiced faintly by candle smoke, then allows his gaze to settle on the assembly. Each member is a study in subtlety, the Earl of Suffolk's brow furrowed in reluctance, Cranmer's lips pressed into a contemplative line, the Duke of Norfolk's expression a fine balance between disdain and intrigue. Cromwell's own hands rest lightly on the table, fingertips leaning into the grain as though seeking the wood's ancient counsel. In a voice that promises calm more than command, he begins, "My lords, this priory, though small, commands lands of some value. The King's treasury is not infinite, and our campaigns demand both men and coin." His tone carries the weight of inevitability, not harsh, but unflinching, like a distant tide gradually lapping at the shore. You might notice how his words flow with the ease of a gentle stream, yet undercurrents of purpose tug insistently at the surface. He pauses, allowing the notion to settle. The pens poised above vellum await his next syllable. In that silence the chamber seems to lean in, each breath drawn with quiet anticipation. Then Cromwell continues, offering a thinly veiled enticement. For those who lend their voices in favour, subsidies shall be allocated for local improvements, roads, bridge repairs, the enhancement of parish schools. He lets the promise hang in the air, delicate as a spider's web, glistening in morning dew. A murmur ripples through the council, like wind stirring autumn leaves. Suffolk shifts, gold chain clicking against his armour, and Cranmer's quill flutters as he considers the offer. Cromwell's eyes flick to each wavering figure before moving on, his expression a study in composed patience. "Of course," he adds, "we understand that loyalty to old foundations runs deep. Yet to resist may carry its own weightier cost, namely the King's displeasure, which history assures us is not without consequence." The brief mention of royal displeasure, delivered without rancour, carries the same sting as a frost-kissed morning. You might sense a subtle collective intake of breath, the momentary tension as each man recalibrates his stance. Cromwell leans back, as if resting after a well-placed bow, eyes still bright with quiet resolve. Around him, the clerk's nibs scratch across parchment in soft, rhythmic ticks, each signature a pulse in the body of new law. The sound is hypnotic, like rainfall on a tin roof, and you can almost trace the path of each inked name as it curls into authority. Every endorsement binds the priory's fate tighter, and with each scrawl, Cromwell's influence weaves further through the tapestry of reform. A gentle cough interrupts Norfolk's murmur of assent, clipped and deliberate. One by one the pens lower and then rise. Guided by the subtle gravity of Cromwell's words, he watches the procession of nods and quills with the equanimity of a gardener watching seedlings take root, knowing well that each bud may either bloom or wither under his careful tending. Finally the last signature dries, its ink no longer wet but firm, an irrevocable decree. Cromwell allows himself the barest of smiles, as if amused by the quiet efficacy of the process. He closes the discussion with measured warmth. "Let us proceed then, mindful of our duty to both crown and country." The simple phrase seals the decision, yet his tone suggests that this closing act is as much a prelude to further manoeuvring as it is a conclusion. As the council rises and lanterns sway overhead, you feel the weight of those signatures settle in the wood beneath your feet. A tapestry of ink and intent that will reshape landscapes and livelihoods. In this chamber of oiled beams and whispered ambition, Cromwell's vote of influence has done its work. Ideas have become policy, and policy in its turn carries the quiet potency of both promise and peril. When the council's murmurs settle into the steady rhythm of quills on parchment, a shadow slips through the chamber's half-open door. A young page, slender as a reed, clutching a small packet stamped with the fleurs de lis. You might barely notice his entrance, the soft scuff of leather against cold stone, the flutter of silk jerkin sleeves, and the page's quick intake of breath as he approaches Cromwell's chair. The page's cheeks are pale, as though the torchlight has left them untouched, and his fingers tremble ever so slightly as he extends the envelope. The seal, deep indigo wax pressed with the Dauphin's lily motif, glistens in the lantern glow, its edges still warm from the pressing iron. It carries a subtle perfume of lavender and damp vellum, a scent both refined and urgent, as if the letter itself were alive with secrets. Cromwell inclines his head, eyes narrowing with polite curiosity. He reaches out, the cuff of his sleeve brushing the rough stone of the table's edge. As he lifts the missive, the page retreats a step, posture rigid with expectation or fear. It's hard to tell which. The door clicks softly shut, blotting out the page's departure and cloaking the chamber in renewed quiet. Beneath the table's scarred surface, Cromwell slides the letter into a narrow slit between oak panels, his fingertips grazing the cool wood. He glances around, taking in the evening's tableau, lanterns swinging gently from wrought iron hooks, shadows dancing along the paneling, councillors bent over documents that glimmer with fresh ink. Not a soul is watching him. He exhales in a controlled sigh, the kind that carries weight without sound. When at last he retrieves the letter, it feels oddly pliant in his palm, as though it flexes with intent. He breaks the seal with the tip of a slender dagger, its blade as unassuming as a prayer needle, but just as sharp. A faint crack echoes, too soft for cursory ears, but resonant in the hush. The envelope unfolds with a whisper, and he reveals a single sheet of vellum, its edges uneven as if lifted hastily from a cutting board. The parchment is warm to the touch, still bearing the imprint of human breath, in finely penned French. A single line curves across the surface. The Queen conspires with the Dauphin. Cromwell's pulse flutters, a quiet drumbeat that hums at the base of his throat. Treason, he knows, can lie in the subtlest of syllables, and here it lurks in 3 small words. You can almost hear the letters whisper, like a silk thread sliding through the air, tying disparate corners of power together. He folds the sheet into quarters, each crease precise, then tucks it into his inner sleeve, where it nestles like a restless sparrow. The sleeve presses against his ribs, an intimate reminder that secrets are carried close to the heart. He straightens, letting his outer posture remain as composed as a marble statue carved in candlelight. A sudden cough erupts at the far end of the table, Cranmer clearing his throat over some theological footnote. Norfolk lifts his head, gaze scanning Cromwell's direction for any sign of fluster. The Earl of Suffolk coughs again, subtly, as though signalling imperial presence is dangerous. But to any casual observer, the chamber seems as before, a gathering of minds weighing matters of church and crown. Cromwell's lips curve in a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a wry acknowledgement of the delicate dance he must now perform. A secret letter in his sleeve, and yet no outward sign of its existence. Around him, the council's conversations swell once more, debates on tithe revenues, the timing of royal visits, the merits of further reform. Each voice is a thread in a tapestry he must unravel, or reweave to protect his own standing. He flexes his fingers beneath the table, as though testing the letter's presence, drawing a quiet reassurance from its hidden bulk. In this slow, calculated moment, he surveys the faces framed by flickering light, eyes bright with devotion, brows heavy with concern, mouths curved in cautious neutrality. Every countenance offers a clue, every gesture a possible betrayal or alliance. Cromwell breathes in the scented air, hints of burnt oil, aging parchment and distant lavender. He allows himself one more gentle exhale, steadying the flutter in his chest. Tomorrow's contingencies already shimmer on the horizon. Midnight rendezvous, coded dispatches, the quiet unthreading of allegiances. For now, though, the letter remains a silent passenger against his side, its weight both burden and boon. Rising, he smooths his gown's folds and offers a courteous nod to the assembly. The chamber's lanterns sway in time with the unspoken promise that policy and poison often share the same pen, and as he steps away you sense the hush deepen once more, an unbroken circle of intrigue that begins and ends with a secret letter born in ink and intent. You slip behind a velvet curtain and enter Anne Boleyn's private salon, where the world outside seems to melt away under the hush of scented air. The alcove is lit by beeswax candles set into wrought iron sconces, their flames quivering against walls draped in deep emerald damask. A quartet of musicians is nestled in one corner, their bows gliding across viol strings with a deliberate slowness that unfurls into a haunting, lingering melody, each note a soft caress rather than a proclamation. The room smells faintly of lavender and rosewater, as though the flowers themselves have been distilled into the very air you breathe. The fragrance wraps around you gently, like a comforting shawl, even as your mind begins to note the dynamics of power unfolding before you. In low, deliberate sips, Anne's ladies hold delicate gold-rimmed goblets of spiced wine. Swirls of steam curl upward, carrying the warmth of clove and cinnamon, an intimate counterpoint to the cool hush of court intrigue. Silken gowns gather around small stools and cushioned benches, their colours ranging from the deepest amethyst of Lady Rochford's velvet to the softest dove grey of Anne's own embroidered kirtle. Each fabric glimmers under the candlelight, revealing subtle patterns of fleur-de-lis or Tudor roses woven into the threads. Jewel-encrusted bolettes, tiny jewelled hairpins glisten at temple and nape, catching stray glints of flame like distant stars. Cromwell advances with measured steps across the plush, tapestry-covered floor, his boots making no sound as he navigates clusters of whispered conversation. Each woman he passes offers a courteous nod, or in some cases, a half-smile that seems to say, "I know you're watching and I know you know I know." The faintest quirk of an eyebrow here, a slight curl of a lip there, these are the small signals by which alliances are formed or fractured. At the centre of the alcove stands Queen Anne herself, draped in a gown of forest green velvet, its neckline edged with strings of small pearls that catch the candlelight in soft, pearly glimmers. She holds her glass aloft with effortless grace, tilting it toward a lady-in-waiting whose laughter rings clear and bright. It is the kind of laughter that unsettles rather than comforts, a laugh that carries secret notes, as if the sound itself were a coded message. Cromwell's eyes drift to the parchment scroll, resting on a low table behind Anne, a delicate page that bears both verses of affection and proposed amendments to ecclesiastical policy. The ink is still wet in places, the handwriting looping with the flourish of both poet and politician. You sense how easily a love poem can become a pact of allegiance, each turn of phrase a thread that binds the speaker closer to the Queen's favour. Soft chatter ripples through the salon, compliments exchanged over the quality of imported silk, murmurs about the King's latest dispatches, and the occasional stifled gasp when a particularly bold proposal is read aloud. One lady recites a line of verse that compares Anne's ambition to a spring rose, beautiful, potent, and capable of pricking those unwise enough to reach out. Another murmurs of alliances in France, of delicate negotiations with the Dauphin, each word sharpening like a knife's edge in the scented air. Cromwell finds a discreet corner, folding his hands behind his back as he listens, cataloguing each blade of gossip with the precision of a botanist examining rare blooms. Here a mention of the Duke of Norfolk's displeasure at recent reforms, there a whisper of the Boleyn family's growing influence among the ladies of the court. He notes which voices rise in bold flourishes and which hang back, ashen with caution. A perfectly timed moment of silence falls as a servant enters on tiptoe, bearing a tray of thinly sliced oranges, dusted with sugar, an unexpected bright sweetness amid the salon's candlelit shadows. The ladies extend gloved fingers, their smiles tightening as they sample the candied fruit, each bite a deliberate indulgence that carries echoes of opulence and cost. Through it all, Cromwell remains composed, his expression a careful mask of placid interest. Yet beneath that calm surface, his mind is already weaving the snippets of conversation into a tapestry of strategy, deciding which favour to court, which alliance to nurture, and which whispered warning to act upon before the day is done. As the music's final chord drifts into the candlelit air, you feel the salon's taut energy loosen just enough for a faint exhale. In this curtained corner of power, words are at once as gentle as a sigh and as potent as a decree, and every lady's step, every lifted glass, is part of a delicate dance. Here, in the hush of spiced wine and silk, the Queen cultivates her inner circle, and you witness the quiet shaping of alliances that may yet alter the course of kingdoms. Beneath the carved oak table, where Cromwell and his junior clerk have paused to confer, a lean usher slips in, as if borne on a whisper. His profile is sharp, an aquiline nose that catches the lantern light and casts a small shadow across his polished cheek. His doublet, cut close at the waist and buttoned with dark burnished metal, hints at both economy and taste. He moves with cat-like poise, boots making no more sound than a mouse's padding on stone. The chamber's hush deepens as the usher approaches, palms pressed together in a conspiratorial gesture that might be borrowed from a theatre rehearsal. The scent of polished leather and sandalwood trails behind him, intermingling with the lingering aroma of Cromwell's ink-stained parchment. You might imagine the air growing thicker, charged with unspoken possibilities. A moment's flicker of recognition passes between usher and clerk. The clerk's eyes widen imperceptibly, an aperture of ambition framed by youthful eagerness and a hint of trepidation. His fingers twitch beneath the table's lip, brushing against the gilt edge of Cromwell's chain of office that hangs low at his side. The gesture is small, almost shy, but in this room it speaks volumes. Coins appear next. Quiet, metallic, a faint clink echoes as a small leather purse is passed from usher to clerk, fingertips grazing like lovers' hands in the dark. The coins rest heavy in the clerk's palm, like promises carved from silver. You can almost taste their coolness, the lingering tang of metal on the tongue, the weight of obligation pressing against the flesh. Cromwell remains still, his posture a study in immovable calm. The only sign of his awareness is the subtle tightening of his jaw, as if a master craftsman sharpening his tools. He allows the transaction to unfold beneath the oak table, an unspoken test of loyalty and discretion. Behind him, the hearth's embers glow softly, casting a warm, lazy light that flirts with the shadows at the room's edge. The usher leans in closer now, voice lowered to a murmur so hushed it might be the crackle of parchment. "Tell your master," he seems to say without words, "that opportunities flow where favour is strong." His lips curve in a half-smile that could be read as both invitation and warning. You might almost hear the internal click of power locks aligning. The clerk swallows, fingertips grazing the coins once more, absorbing their promise and their threat. His cheeks flush a quiet rose under the polished veneer of courtly composure. He shifts his weight, the rustle of his tunic's hem scattering like autumn leaves. Every micro-movement here is a declaration. I am willing, I am eager, I tremble. Cromwell's hand rests lightly on the table's edge, fingers brushing the intricate relief of Tudor roses and oaks. He inhales a slow, deliberate breath that stirs the scent of aged wood and tallow candles. Though he remains silent, his presence fills the space, a reminder that every favour demanded or bestowed can become a dagger's edge in this court. A subtle cough interrupts the moment, a distant echo in the corridor, and the usher straightens. He offers a final, almost mocking nod to Cromwell, and slips away, boots resuming their near-silent tread. The clerk pockets the purse, his movements deliberate as though sealing a covenant. You might sense the hush deepen, as if the room itself is holding its breath for what comes next. Cromwell finally speaks, his tone soft yet edged with that familiar undercurrent of authority. "Well done," he intones, each syllable cool as dawn mist. "We shall see how well your discretion serves us both." There's a hint of observational humour in his voice, as though savouring the clerk's wide-eyed relief or dread. The words themselves are gentle, but their delivery carries the crisp finality of a folded decree. The clerk nods, shoulders straightening beneath the weight of new responsibility. He turns to resume his post at Cromwell's side, the purse concealed within his doublet's folds. In the wake of the usher's departure, the chamber's lamplight steadies, and shadows lengthen once more. You watch the clerk's gaze linger on Cromwell's back, a silent promise that this favour will not be forgotten. And in that lingering silence, the room exhales, a soft acknowledgement that within these walls, every coin exchanged, every whispered pledge, becomes part of the tapestry of influence. Cromwell remains motionless for a heartbeat longer, fingertips still toying with the table's carved motifs, as if savouring the subtle power of that small, clandestine moment. Then he rises, the ripple of his robe a quiet tide, and leads the way onward, away from the murmurs of commerce, toward the ever-shifting tides of courtly favour. Anne's private chamber feels suspended in its own hush, as though the tapestries and velvet drapes have absorbed every echo of courtly bustle. The air here is warmer, perfumed with the delicate scent of rosewater and polished wood. Candle flames flicker gently in wrought iron sconces, casting a soft glow over the room's deep emerald furnishings. You might notice the sheen of polished oak floors and the muted shimmer of painted plaster above, each surface deliberately chosen to reflect quiet elegance rather than ostentation. Cromwell stands near a low divan draped in brocade, its cushions plump and inviting. The fabric's threads woven from silk and gold catch the light so that the emerald pattern seems to ripple like water. As he shifts his weight, you hear the faint creak of leather on wood beneath his boots. Anne appears at his side, her gown a cascade of velvet that pools around her feet. The green of her dress is darker here than in the chapel, richer, like the forest depths at dusk. She moves with measured grace, her footsteps silent on the rug's thick pile. A gentle sigh escapes her lips as she settles onto the edge of the divan. You might smell the rosewood polish of the cushions and the faint trace of her perfume, equal parts rosewater and sandalwood, lingering in the space between them. When she beckons him closer, her voice is barely above a breath. "Thomas," she murmurs, and the single word hangs between them like a treasured secret. Her eyes, bright with a determined glimmer, lock onto his. There's no courtly fanfare here, only the intimate press of shared purpose. She leans forward and touches the brocade cushion's edge, fingertips tracing the raised floral motifs in a gesture that feels both tender and resolute. "Support my regency while Henry hunts France," she whispers, each syllable measured, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. Her breath comes in soft ribbons, carrying the gentle warmth of her resolve. Cromwell's hand drifts down to rest against the cushion where her fingers linger. The fabric yields under his palm, silk giving way to gold thread in a subtle play of texture. In that small contact, you sense the weight of her ambition, the soft opulence of velvet and the cold gleam of the throne she seeks to secure. To touch it is to acknowledge her stakes, to feel through fingertips the cost of her aspiration. A faint smile plays on Cromwell's lips, one that Anne cannot see, but you might catch it reflected in a nearby mirror. It's the kind of humour born from the endless dance of court politics, a recognition that even a humble cushion can become a symbol of power. Yet he offers no words of mirth. Instead, he inclines his head in respectful acknowledgement, eyes steady and unreadable. Anne's gaze flickers, as if searching the depths of his expression for assurance. The candles on the mantel cast elongated shadows that sway gently, lending the scene an almost dreamlike quality. You notice how the shadows play across the folds of her gown, tracing the silhouette of a queen both confident and uncertain. "To promise," she continues in that same soft tone, "is to risk every oath you have sworn. To refuse," her voice trails off, the unspoken consequence hanging in the perfumed air. You feel the tension in the silence that follows, the delicate balance between loyalty and self-preservation. Cromwell breathes in slowly, the cadence of his inhalation almost synchronized with the subtle rise and fall of her chest. The quiet rustle of her gown's train settling is the only other sound. In his mind he turns over her request, the delicate architecture of support, the potential rewards, and the ever-present peril that accompanies royal favour. He considers the web of alliances that would solidify her regency, and those he might fracture by refusing. At last, he lets his breath escape in a controlled exhale, the faintest hint of resignation or resolve threading through it. "Your Grace," he says, voice steady, "your cause is just, and I shall lend it my counsel." The words themselves are unadorned. Their weight lies in the realm of consequence. Anne's relief is subtle but visible, a softening of her shoulders, and the gentlest of smiles touching her lips. She rises, the velvet of her gown shushing against the floor, and offers him a curt nod of gratitude. In that unembellished gesture, you witness a bond forged in whispers and velvet touch. As Cromwell steps back, the chamber's hush deepens, carrying with it the unspoken understanding that this promise will shape the days to come. The gentle aroma of rosewater lingers, a fragrant reminder of the alliance formed in the quiet intimacy of the Queen's private salon, an alliance that might prove both crown and cross. A crisp breeze snakes through the open doorway of the hunting lodge, carrying the scent of damp earth and half-smoked pine logs. You step inside to find Cromwell, joining the Duke of Norfolk's retinue. A small circle, gathered around a broad stone hearth. The firelight dances across rough-hewn beams and throws mottled patterns on the flagstones underfoot, each irregular slab worn smooth by boot and hobnailed shoe. Along the mantel, falcons perch on gloved fists, their plumage a spectrum of russet and cream, eyes half shut in what seems like regal indifference. The bird's talons grip leather jesses with an imperceptible shift, and every so often one ruffles its feathers with a soft hiss, an animal sigh that mingles with the lodge's warm murmur. A kennel boy stands nearby, coiling the birds' hoods with the care of a jeweler handling pearls, and you might catch the faint rustle of hawk leather against wool at his sleeve. Cromwell settles onto a carved oak bench, its backrest etched with the Norfolk coat of arms, a bull's head flanked by laurels. The wood is polished to a muted glow, its grain telling tales of hunts and heraldry. A serving man approaches with a flagon of claret, the wine's deep red hue catching the hearth's glow like captured sunset. Cromwell accepts a small wooden goblet, fingertips brushing the rim, and brings it to his lips. The wine's taste is warming, hints of blackberry and smoke, a gentle reminder that even in politics one's cup must be savoured slowly. Around him, Norfolk's men lean in, voices low and urgent. You hear the scrape of a finger tracing the rim of a pewter cup, the soft exhale of breath before a whispered accusation. They inveigh against the king's latest policy, the suppression of chantries, those small chapels dotting the countryside where prayers for the dead offered both solace and subtle revenue. One knight's voice, rich and measured, praises the prayers of the faithful as the true lifeblood of realm and soul, while another leaner man chafes at the idea of soldiers raised upon holy ground. The chill from the open door battles the hearth's warmth, creating a subtle draught that stirs the flickering shadows. Norfolk himself stands by the fire, tall and imposing, hands resting easily on the pommel of his hunting sword. His doublet of deep burgundy velvet flutters slightly in the breeze, and you might notice the gleam of gold embroidery at his collar, an echo of the very tapestry he seeks to defend. He addresses Cromwell with courtesy, each phrase laced with the politeness of a host offering bread, yet beneath the surface you feel the current of intent, dark as the river at midnight. Master Secretary, Norfolk begins, voice polished like the blade at his hip. We value your service to the crown, yet one wonders if our faith, and the faith of our tenants, should be bartered for coin. His gaze drifts to the falcons, then back to Cromwell, an effortless shift that suggests falconry and favour share the same art of mastery. Cromwell's response is calm, measured. He tilts the goblet, watching the wines ripple, and acknowledges the Duke's point with a slow nod. Around them, the lodge's hush tightens, as if the very walls lean nearer to catch each nuance of tone. You sense the promise of violence beneath Norfolk's words, a hawk's talon hidden within velvet glove. A servant stokes the fire, and the logs hiss in protest, sending a plume of smoke curling toward the rafters. The scent of burning resin mixes with the earthy aroma of falconry mews, dried grains and the musk of raptor feathers. It's a curious comfort. The lodge feels both sanctuary and stage, a place where politics and pastime converge. Another sip of claret warms Cromwell's chest, and you might notice his sleeve brushing against the bench's carved arm, his subtle claim to his place at this clandestine council. He listens attentively, cataloguing each argument as though they were pheasants perched on a distant branch waiting to be chosen. Norfolk's final words drift through the lodge like smoke. We trust you will consider the traditions that bind our houses, lest the old blood be forced to defend itself. There is no overt threat, yet you feel the tension coiled like a hunting hawk ready to strike. Cromwell bows slightly, lips curved in a near smile that might be amusement or resolve. The soft crackle from the hearth seems to applaud his composure. He raises his goblet again in a silent toast to those gathered, and the lodge exhales, settling back into its rhythm of shadows and whispered ambition. Here, amid the hush of wood smoke and falcon's breath, the duel of old blood and new is played, not with swords, but with the slow metal of voices and the steady pulse of wine. A hush settles in Cromwell's private chamber, as the heavy oak door creaks open on its iron hinges. A messenger draped in a grey wool cloak steps inside with the measured gait of one accustomed to perilous errands. The cloak's hem brushes the stone floor, stirring a swirl of dust motes in the lantern light. You might catch a faint scent of damp wool and the distant tang of rain on the messenger's hood, as though he's just arrived from the moors. He pauses before Cromwell's polished desk, its surface scattered with parchments and quills resting in ink-stained puddles. The messenger's boots come to a soft stop, and he inclines his head once, an almost imperceptible bow, before producing a scroll of vellum bound by a single ribbon of crimson silk, and sealed with a dollop of bright red wax. The seal is pressed with the arms of a noble house, 3 golden falcons beneath a crown. It gleams in the lamplight like a beacon. Cromwell, seated in a high-backed chair carved with Tudor roses, reaches out slowly. His fingertips graze the edges of the wax seal, its surface cool and slightly tacky against his skin. You might notice the way his index finger flits across the seal's ridge, as if tracing the heraldry could impart its hidden message. The messenger retreats a step, hands folded at his waist, watching with eyes that dart between shadows and candle flames. When Cromwell finally breaks the seal, it cracks with a soft snap that echoes through the chamber like a whispered promise. He unfolds the scroll with deliberate care. The vellum exhales a faint, papery sigh, carrying hints of animal glue and sun-bleached fields where the parchment was cured. As the scroll unfurls, lines of neat, looping script come into view. Offers of land grants stretched out across its length in flourished ink. 3 manors in the West Riding, the domain of Thornby Hall, tenants held at nominal rent. Each name of field and hall conjures images in Cromwell's mind: rolling pastures grazing fat sheep, stone manor houses set against a sky of gathering clouds, green hedgerows cradling bountiful orchards. You might sense the gentle tug of ambition in those visions, a pleasant daydream of private estates and rural retreats far from the rumble of court. But beneath the embroidered promise of land lies a more sombre note, inked in a darker hand. Ease up on taxes, or lose more than your reputation. The words sit heavy on the page, an unspoken threat lodged between the lines. Cromwell's chest tightens at the thought. Fortune is seldom free, and each grant is balanced on a knife's edge of obligation. He rolls the scroll back with the same measured motion, the vellum surface whispering against itself. The crimson ribbon falls away, and the messenger catches it, tucking it into his vest. Cromwell leans back in his chair, eyes closing for a fraction of a breath as he weighs the offer and the warning that accompanies it. The lantern's flame flickers, sending ripples of warmth across the chamber walls. You might notice the soft creak of Cromwell's leather jerkin as he shifts, the subtle scrape of his boot against the rug. He herds the messenger with a slight, wry arch of his brow, as if amused by the delicate choreography of bribe and caution. "Your master's generosity is noted," he says at last, voice smooth as aged claret. There's no rush in his tone, only the calm certainty of a man accustomed to turning promises into power. Coins might be the common currency of persuasion, but here the true currency is land and influence and debt. Cromwell taps the scroll's edge once more, as though testing its weight, then lays it on the desk beside a ledger of royal accounts. Every promised manor becomes another entry in his mind's tally of favours owed and rendered. The messenger bows again, lips barely whispering. "Your Grace's decision shall be conveyed," before slipping back through the door, grey cloak blending with the dusk beyond. The chamber exhales in his absence. The lanterns glow steady once more. Cromwell remains seated, hands clasped before him, eyes drifting to the window where the last light of day pools against the river. He breathes in the faint scent of damp wool and burning tallow, allowing a slow exhale to steady his thoughts. Each estate promised is another debt owed, a ledger far more complex than any inked account, and in the dimly lit quiet, you feel the subtle shift of power, the silent acknowledgement that in this court, allegiance is bartered not just in words but in soil and stone, and the price of loyalty is one's very future. The private chamber is hushed beneath its high-beamed ceiling, the timber darkened by age and candle soot. A single candelabrum stands at the table's centre, its flames flickering in soft golden arcs that reach upward like delicate fingers. The air holds a faint tang of beeswax mingled with aged wood, and somewhere behind the heavy tapestries, a servant's footstep echoes once before vanishing into silence. Norfolk stands at the head of the table, his broad shoulders framed by the flickering light. In his hand he holds a silver goblet, its surface so highly polished it seems to glow from within, like a shard of moon caught in a world of shadows. The goblet's stem is slender, engraved with oaken leaves and small turtles, symbols of endurance and patience. As he lifts it in salute, the candlelight fractures across its curves, scattering glints of light across the linen-clad board. Cromwell's breath, almost imperceptible, catches in the hush. He knows the law, that Norfolk's inner circle whispers of rivals laid to rest, with a draught so subtle no tongue could detect the poison. The thought settles around him with curious stillness, an invisible cloak of unease draped across his shoulders. Yet the scene before him is one of courtly grace. A row of attendants stands back, their faces blank masks of composure. The room seems to hold its breath as lord and minister exchange a brief, measured glance. Norfolk inclines his head in formal courtesy, an unspoken invitation. Cromwell lifts his own goblet in response, fingers brushing the cool metal. The goblet's weight is solid, reassuring, until you remember that in this chamber, even comfort can harbour peril. He brings the rim to his lips with the smooth precision of habit. The wine inside is dark and viscous, catching the candelabra's glow like garnet embers. Cromwell lets only a cautious sip brush his tongue. A whisper of grape, a hint of oak, a wisp of smoke. He holds it there, tasting not just the wine, but the chamber's tension, examining the way Norfolk's expression shifts, or perhaps remains impeccably unreadable. Behind him, the tapestries stir as a draught creeps beneath the door, carrying the muted scent of frost-laden night. The faint hiss of embers in the hearth punctuates the moment. It is an unhurried rhythm, as deliberate as each measured breath. Cromwell sets the goblet back on the table with a soft clink, a sound that seems to reverberate through the silence like a settled promise. Norfolk's gaze meets his again, and in the recesses of that look lies both respect and challenge. To loyalty, the Duke intones, voice low and resonant, and to those who grasp it firmly, his words hover between them, neither boast nor threat, but a deftly balanced blend of both. The chamber exhales, attendants shift, candles gutter ever so slightly, and the shadows retreat into corners. Cromwell straightens, subtly flexing his fingers to reassure himself of his own endurance. He allows a faint, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement rather than agreement, a promise to continue the dance of diplomacy without stumbling. He lifts the goblet once more, this time draining the remainder of the wine in a single, unhurried draught. The liquid slides down his throat, warm as a stolen secret, leaving only a trace of crimson at the goblet's rim. The act is both bold and necessary. In this court, hesitation can be as deadly as poison. When he sets the goblet down for the final time, the silver surface seems to sigh, its light dimming in the wake of his motion. Norfolk inclines his head slightly, the candlelight flaring in approval. The hush returns thicker now, laden with shared understanding. Cromwell refrains from commenting on either the wine or the warning veiled in Norfolk's toast. Instead, he offers a polite acknowledgement, a measured, "Your Grace's health." The words float between them, gentle yet firm, a quiet affirmation of his own survival. As he steps back, the chamber's hush loosens into a gentle murmur of resumed activity. Candles flicker steadily once more, and the heavy door swings open, spilling a sliver of cold night air into the warm interior. Cromwell's boots click softly on the flagstones as he departs, the silver goblets glint receding in the candlelight, an elegant reminder that in Henry's court, the most enticing hospitality can be the most treacherous gift. A crisp breeze drifts through the palace courtyard, trailing the faint tang of river mist across cobblestones, slick with morning dew. In this half-light, a burly draper steps forward, his fine homespun tunic clinging damply to broad shoulders. He carries in his arms a bolt of Flemish broadcloth, the fabric's colours deep midnight blue flecked with silver threads, shimmering like quiet galaxies under the lantern glow. You might notice how the cloth feels unexpectedly cool against his palm, as though it still carries the memory of the weaving mill's underground vaults. He unfurls it with a gentle flourish, the material cascading in a soft waterfall of folds that settle around his forearm like drapery in a chapel. Each fold reveals another glint of metallic thread, a promise of wealth to those who wear it. The draper's brow is slick with perspiration, not from the cool air, but from the weight of his petition. He clears his throat, and the single sound echoes across the courtyard's stone walls, drawing a few curious glances from passing pages and guards. His voice, when it comes, is low and urgent, balanced on the edge between pride and desperation. "My lord," he begins, the broadcloth rustling in accompaniment. This fine Flemish cloth, unmatched in any market north of Calais, suffers under the weight of tariffs that choke both merchant and consumer. His hands gesture to the bolt, the folds catching light as if inviting admiration. Without your good offices, our trade will falter. Factories close, workers starve, and the king's coffers, once enriched by our exports, grow thin. At his waist, a leather purse swings gently, its flap undone to reveal a row of gold coins peeking out like eager faces at a festival. The coins catch the dim glow, each one a silent insistence that commerce flows where profit beckons. You can almost hear the coin's metallic murmur, a subtle undercurrent to the draper's plea. Cromwell stands nearby, cloak brushed by the cold breeze, hands folded in poised attentiveness. He observes the draper's tremor, an almost imperceptible shake of the jaw, the quick inhale when he fears his argument has fallen flat. The servant pages cluster at the edges of the courtyard, their polished boots glinting in the half-light. But Cromwell remains his own station's centre, calm, collected, implacable. The draper continues, voice steadying with each word. A modest reduction in duties would not only sustain our looms, but also keep the king's nobles clothed in the finest fabrics, strengthening their regard for his reign. Is it not better for the crown to be draped in splendour than in plain homespun? He offers a wan smile, revealing a flash of crooked teeth that have tasted both the sweetness of coin and the bitterness of rejection. Cromwell's gaze shifts from the cloth to the draper's leather purse, then back again, as though weighing tangible wealth against intangible favour. The brisk air carries a faint scent of tallow from nearby torches, mingling with the cloth's faint woolen musk. In this suspended moment, commerce and court intersect, both require delicate negotiation and mutual assurance. A gentle chuckle escapes Cromwell's lips, soft, as if amused by the draper's earnest plea and the delicate art of weaving influence. Your cloth is indeed of the finest quality, he says, voice measured like the slow turning of parchment pages, and your argument, well crafted. I shall present it to the council at our next gathering. He inclines his head, a gesture of both acknowledgement and authority. The draper exhales in relief, shoulders dropping as tension seeps away. He bows low, sweeping a hand across the bolt of fabric, as if offering a silent flourish. Your mercy honours us, my lord, he murmurs before stepping back, the bolt rolling up in his arms like a tide receding from shore. As the draper retreats, you sense the courtyard exhale with him. Torches flicker in unison, pages resume their errands, and the soft echo of footsteps returns. Cromwell remains still for a moment longer, fingers brushing the edge of his cloak as he considers the draper's words, and the weight of gold and cloth as implements of influence. In the cool hush of dawn, you witness how even the humblest merchant can twist the king's ear, if only they know precisely which thread to pull. A cool draught drifts through the antechamber as the doors swing open on their heavy hinges, carrying with it the vague scent of damp earth and old iron. Before Cromwell steps a knight whose once proud bearing has contracted into something lean and wary. His armour, once burnished and imposing, now bears the patina of rust, its breastplate pocked with tiny craters that catch the lamplight like distant stars in a gloomy sky. Each piece of mail hangs slightly loose, as though waiting for its master's strength to return. He inclines his head in a deep, deliberate bow, the creak of corroded rivets punctuating the silence. Beneath his lowered helm, you might notice the fine lines of age etched around tense eyes, and the way his gaunt cheeks hollow beneath a thin moustache. He blooms with a faint must of metal and smoke, as if he has doffed both helmet and hope in one motion. My lord, he begins, voice low as gravel, each syllable coated with fatigue. I come to beg your mercy. His words tumble out with hesitant gravity, as though each carries the weight of a blade's promise. You sense the desperation coiling in his throat, debts amassed like storm clouds, threatening to drown the ancestral lands that once sustained his family's name. Cromwell listens, hands folded behind his back, cloak rustling softly with each subtle shift. The knight's fingers brush against the frayed edge of his tunic, once vibrant crimson, now dulled by travel and worry. There's a faint rustle of fabric, a gentle reminder that even in this grand court, cloth and steel bear traces of human endeavour and error. I fought at Flodden's side, the knight continues, voice gathering strength on the memory of battles past. I charged through pike and shot, mind fixed on the king's banner. Yet now, my lands are mortgaged, my retainers unpaid, and my children's hearths grow cold. Each phrase is a small plea carved into the air, stirring motes of dust that dance in the lamplight like silent witnesses to his fall from grace. As the knight straightens, his once confident gait shudders under the burden of regret. His sabaton scuffs the stone floor, a soft, weary sound that echoes through the chamber's hush. You might imagine the echo as a distant drumbeat, a reminder that even in the quietest rooms, the past's thunder can still be heard. Cromwell's gaze tracks the knight's motions with calm scrutiny, lips gently pressed into a line of measured consideration. He inhales, the subtle tang of cold stone and flickering wax curling into his senses, then exhales in an almost inaudible murmur. The knight's plight lays bare a simple truth. Power here is measured not only by crowns or proclamations, but by the fragile security of vows kept and debts honoured. A servant appears quietly, bearing a plain wooden cup filled with watered wine. The knight accepts it with trembling hands, the cup's rim grazing his moustache and leaving a faint smear of red. He lifts the cup to his lips, and the wine's thin warmth seems to steady him for a moment. You sense the brief comfort that flickers across his features, brief as a summer's sunburst before slipping back into shadow. Cromwell steps closer, boots whispering against the worn flagstones. His voice is low, measured, as soft as the rustle of vellum pages. "Sir Robert," he says, using the knight's name as both acknowledgement and invitation, "your service to the crown cannot be forgotten, nor can your family's legacy be left to ruin. We shall review each obligation, negotiate with your creditors, and determine a path to restore your estates." The knight inhales sharply, a single breath carried on a humble wind, and bows once more, the rusted armour groaning in gentle protest. "Your mercy honours me, my lord," he murmurs, voice thick with relief that mingles with lingering shame. Cromwell offers a slight nod, as genteel as the dip of a sword point in salute. "Remember," he continues, "that loyalty is a two-edged blade. It binds you to the crown, but also grants you the security only the king can bestow." There is a faint wry warmth in his tone, a subtle jest that acknowledges the knight's restored hope and the underlying bargain that ties service to salvation. As the knight departs with steadier step, armour rattling softly, a rhythmic echo of redemption, the chamber seems to breathe again. The echo of his tread lingers, a gentle affirmation that within these walls, compassion is tempered by caution, and that even a swordsman fallen from grace may yet stand upright through the quiet power of a well-placed promise. As Cromwell rises from the merchant's petition, the echo of his boots on the flagstones fades into the hush of the corridor. Lantern light pools in gentle circles along the walls, illuminating tapestries that seem to hold their breath at his passing. The scent of damp stone and faint tallow lingers in the air, a soft reminder of the palace's long history and even longer shadows. Just as he reaches the narrow doorway, its lintel worn by centuries of courtiers, the hush is punctuated by the faintest of rustles. You might almost miss it, the soft brush of fabric, and the barely audible scrape of leather against cloak. A goldsmith, slender and quick-footed, slips alongside Cromwell. In one practiced motion, the smith's hand dips beneath the hem of Cromwell's heavy woolen cloak, and emerges clutching a small, rough-hewn purse. The goldsmith's fingers press against the pouch, its leather soft from use, and then release, allowing it to vanish into the folds of Cromwell's garment. There is no flourish, no overt exchange, only the momentary alignment of two palms and the brief exhale of effort. The smith's eyes flick upward, meeting Cromwell's with a glance that is both plea and promise. Then he slips away, dissolving into the corridor's dim light as silently as a shadow at dusk. Cromwell pauses, fingertips brushing the outer edge of his cloak where the purse's weight nestles against his thigh. The coins inside shift ever so slightly, a muted clink that might be mistaken for a distant echo of the chapel's bells. You can almost feel their collective heft, each one a disc of copper or silver stamped with the king's head and the realm's motto. Together they form a tangible reminder. Everything here has a price, from a minor reprieve on tariffs to the faintest hint of royal favour. He allows a small, almost imperceptible smile, one that carries the faintest trace of humour. After all, how many sermons on righteous governance has he delivered to this very goldsmith, extolling the virtues of honesty and piety? He can already sense the quiet irony. Speaking of virtue while harbouring a purse of hidden coin, Cromwell inhales slowly, the crisp air of the corridor filling his lungs like a cleansing draught. Then he exhales, steadying his thoughts. In his mind, he begins the ledger of possibilities: a donation to a local parish, the discreet relocation of a troublesome creditor, perhaps a small token to the Queen's own almoner. Each coin could buy a favour, mend a relationship, or secure silence. Yet with every favour rendered, a debt is incurred, not only to the goldsmith, but to the invisible network of influence that crisscrosses these walls. He steps forward, cloak brushing tapestry and stone alike, and allows the purse to settle deeper into his folds. The sound of his passage returns, the soft click of heels on flagstone, the quiet murmur of distant conversations. He pauses at a torch, its flame flickering, and watches the light dance across the metal of his cloak's clasp. There is a subtle satisfaction in the clandestine moment, a reminder that power in this court is as much about what is unseen as what is displayed. Cromwell straightens his shoulders and continues on, every footfall measured. The coins remain an undercurrent to his stride, a private rhythm beneath the stately pace of a royal minister. A servant bows in passing. Cromwell nods in return, lips curving in a courteous smile that conceals more than it reveals. Behind that mask of courtesy, he carries the goldsmith's silent plea and the silent promise to use it wisely. As he turns the corner toward the Privy Council chambers, the corridor's torches gutter in time with his steps, their light wavering like thoughtful breaths. The hidden purse remains close to his side, its weight a small, intimate secret in the world he inhabits, where favours and threats dance beneath every gesture. The bribe under cloak is both a lifeline and a ledger, recording debts as surely as the inked scrolls on his desk. And for Thomas Cromwell, mindful of every advantage and obligation, it is another tool in the delicate art of survival. The great hall yawns before you, its long oaken tables gleaming beneath hundreds of candles set in wrought iron candelabra. The air here is rich with the aroma of spiced delicacies and richly roasted meats, an olfactory tapestry meant to dazzle even the most jaded courtier. At the far end, the high table sits beneath tapestries depicting royal triumphs, battles won, alliances forged, reminders that this feast is more than mere sustenance. It is spectacle and strategy. Massive silver platters, polished so brightly they mirror the flicker of torch flames, are carried in by liveried servants. The first holds roast swan, plump, ivory breasts, scored with scoring and glazed in honey, their bones curved into graceful arches as if frozen mid-flight. You might hear the hushed gasp when the swan is placed, a nod to the king's mastery over both land and water. On another platter, entire peacocks lie reassembled in full plumage. Their cobalt and emerald feathers, plucked and artfully replaced, fan out across velvet cloth, the eyes of each plume catching torchlight like starlit pools. Servants stand ready, carving these birds with practiced reverence, as courtiers lean in, their breath held between anticipation and polite restraint. Between these grand birds are bowls of spiced custard, steam rising in pale tendrils through intricately carved gilt rims. The custard's scent is a soft swirl of nutmeg, cinnamon, and a whisper of saffron, the latter so prized that a mere pinch could denote vast wealth. Each bowl is rimmed with candied orange peel and fruit preserved in syrup that catches the light like molten amber. Cromwell stands at the edge of the table, his posture unhurried, cloak rustling faintly as he steps closer. He inhales the heady perfume of the feast, the smoky sweetness of glazed meats, the warm haze of ground spices, and beneath it all, the subtle tang of burning wood from the hearth. You might notice the way his eyes flick over each dish, cataloguing textures and colours with the precision of a scholar examining rare manuscripts. Rather than reaching for a hearty slice, Cromwell nibbles barely a crumb, just enough to honour custom, yet not enough to risk the silent threat that lingers in gilded chalices. Each ornate dish is not only a show of wealth, but an opportunity for discreet assassination. A dab of deadly nightshade hidden in a lemon glaze, a single tainted nut ground into the custard's smooth surface. In this hall, hospitality can be as lethal as a blade. Across the table, a disgraced noble coughs into a lace-edged handkerchief after a bold sample of venison pâté. Nearby, the Duke of Norfolk offers a piece of glazed partridge to an eager companion, their smiles polite but their eyes narrowing in appraisal. Every gesture here carries double meaning, a taste of support, a morsel of threat. The banquet's centerpieces are as much political statements as culinary marvels. A silver fountain pours wine into goblets like a liquid tapestry, each drop reasserting the king's abundance. Bowls of candied fruits, quince, cherries and figs bathed in rosewater sugar sit beside loaves of the finest white bread, each crumb an emblem of status. Cromwell allows himself a half smile, subtle as the curve of a knife in its sheath. A servant steps forward, offering a tiny morsel of sugared almond. He accepts, lets it rest on his tongue, and lets the sugar dissolve. It is a gesture of measured participation, enough to show he is present, but not enough to indulge suspicion. Behind him, the hall hums with conversation, quiet warnings slipped beneath laughter. Alliances, solidified in toasts that clink like concealed weapons. The noble next to Cromwell raises a goblet in his direction. "To your health," he intones, voice smooth as velvet drapery. Cromwell inclines his head, eyes bright with the practiced calm of a man who knows that every toast can seal one's fate. As the first plates are cleared, bones and shells collected with almost ceremonial care, Cromwell steps back, cloak swishing like a tide retreating from shore. The feast continues, a relentless parade of dishes designed to lull the senses even as it sharpens the mind to danger. In this hall of splendor and subterfuge, he remains ever watchful, every crumb a reminder that the deadliest battles can be waged with forks and platters, as surely as with swords. Cromwell approaches the high table with deliberate calm, each step measured as if marking time to an unspoken rhythm. The hall's long benches gleam under floodlights of torch and candle, their polished oak surfaces worn smooth by generations of courtiers. At each place, a cushion awaits, deep crimson velvet embroidered with gold thread in the shape of the royal crest, its slight sheen catching the flicker of flame. He pauses before his seat, the third from the king's right hand, 2 places removed from the golden throne itself. To his left, the Archbishop of Canterbury presides, his mitre rising like a silent spire of piety. To his right, the Master of the Rolls, parchment scrolls tucked beneath one arm, his robes as crisp as cut parchment. The space between the two is a delicate arena, where the smallest shift in posture becomes a statement of intent. Cromwell kneels briefly to adjust the crimson cushion, smoothing the velvet, so that no wrinkle betrays haste. The fabric yields under his palms, luxuriously thick, soft as dusk-lit clouds, yet its firmness offers a subtle support, reminding him of the weight this seat carries. He rises with a subtle grace, seating himself so that his back aligns perfectly with the carved bench's spine, shoulders squared yet relaxed. The air here is warmer, scented faintly with roast meats and spiced wine, a gentle haze rising from plates like early morning mist. He inhales slowly, allowing the flavors of the feast to mingle with the deeper undertones of ambition and allegiance. A faint rustle echoes as nearby courtiers shift, and he notes the precise sound of brocade brushing silk, a tapestry of deference and disdain woven through every movement. A breath too deep could suggest nervousness. A shift too sudden might hint at overconfidence. Cromwell's breathing remains soft and even, a quiet metronome beneath the hall's hum. His chest expands just enough to signal presence without presumption, a measured puff of authority that neither puffs him up nor shrinks him back. With one hand, he flexes his fingertips against the cushion's edge, testing its give a silent assertion that he belongs here as firmly as any noble born to title. His other hand rests lightly on his thigh, a gentle anchor against the gale of eyes that drift in his direction. Guests glance toward him, a duke's raised eyebrow, a countess's subtle nod, a young page's curious stare before he quickly lowers his gaze. Before him the king gestures for more spiced custard, and Cromwell's eyes flick to the bowl's gilded rim. He offers no haste to reach for it, knowing that even the act of serving oneself must be timed to royal inclination. Each act of ingestion, each nod of approval to a passing dish, is a calculated note in the Banquets symphony. The Archbishop shifts, the soft scrape of ermine echoing louder than expected, and Cromwell allows his gaze to travel briefly over the bishop's ornate vestments. He notes how the gold threads catch torchlight like fish scales, shimmering with piety and politics entwined. Then his eyes return to the Master of the Rolls, whose slight cough after a sip of wine draws a stifled smile from those nearby, an unmistakable signal that he finds the vintage less than satisfactory. Cromwell's posture remains unwavering, though his mind catalogues each nuance. Who leans in when the king jests? Who sits rigid when toasts are made? Who watches his neighbour's reaction before offering their own? In this hall, seating is not merely functional, it is the geometry of power. A shift of a breath can reorient alliances, a subtle lean can realign loyalties. He inclines his head just slightly as a clerk processes a new dish being placed at the king's elbow, an acknowledgement of abundance and hierarchy. The golden basins of mead pass within sight, each goblet's stem catching light in a momentary flare. Cromwell's eyes follow the movement, tracing the path of privilege as it winds through the assembly. The palace's wooden rafters loom overhead, their beams darkened by centuries of smoke and ambition. Through slender windows set high in the walls, a sliver of pale sky hints at the world beyond this courtly microcosm. For now, though, Cromwell is here. Crimson cushion beneath him, regal tapestry beside him, and the ornate dance of status unfolding around him with every breath, every glance, and every silent gesture. Henry's voice rises above the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation, a deep baritone that reverberates in the vaulted hall like distant thunder. The king leans back in his gilded chair, hand resting on the pommel of his jeweled goblet, and unleashes a roar of laughter that ripples through the assembly. It is the sound of absolute authority mingled with genuine amusement, a reminder that in this court, humour is the sovereign's chosen currency. Across the long table, Cromwell inclines his head ever so slightly, the faintest arch of his eyebrow betraying an internal tally of the jests to come. His cheeks warm to a gentle rose, though the heat stays well within the realm of polite colour. He presses his lips into a measured curve, a practiced smile that signals he is neither the butt of the joke nor above its reach. Henry's latest quip is delivered with the gusto of a stage actor, a bawdy twist on a peasant's lament, reworked to poke fun at a recently disgraced courtier. He swore his vows in wine, the king booms, but could not keep them sober. The hall erupts in laughter, rich, unrestrained, carrying the scent of spilled ale and tickled ribs. You might hear the clink of goblets as men raise a second toast to wit, the friction of braids shifting in amused agreement. Cromwell listens, lips parting just enough to allow a gentle chuckle to escape. It is the kind of laughter that neither breaks into full guffaw, nor stays so restrained it betrays disapproval. His is the middle path, an artful balance that shows loyalty without lapsing into buffoonery. Around him, courtiers gauge his reaction. A silk-clad countess peeks in his direction, searching for a cue. A young page watches wide-eyed, hoping to learn the unspoken rules of royal humour. The air here is vibrant with sound. The king's hearty guffaws, the echoing backdrop of wood-panelled walls, and the soft rustle of velvet sleeves as guests shift to catch the next punchline. Each jest carries its own flavour, some sweet as honey, others tart as unripe fruit. Cromwell inhales slowly, savouring the atmosphere as one would a fine wine, allowing its warmth to fill him before carefully exhaling any hint of tension. Henry's gaze sweeps the hall, pausing on those who laugh too freely and those who remain statuesque in their restraint. He singles out a young noble who dared to miss the joke, raising an eyebrow that cuts through the laughter like a flint strikes steel. The noble, cheeks aflame, forces a stifled chuckle, as though chewing on a thorn. Cromwell makes a discreet mental note. Laughter is not just amusement, but an obligation. Refuse it, and you risk the label of humorless. Indulge too heartily, and you risk the label of fool. A servant glides in with fresh tankards of mead, the goblet's rims brushing cling-cling, a whispered punctuation to the humour. The mead's heady sweetness drifts across the table, mingling with the king's laughter to create a heady brew of mirth and privilege. Cromwell's fingertips graze the cool metal of his goblet, testing its weight before raising it just enough to offer a silent toast to the king's wit. Henry follows with another jest, this one a sly observation about the archbishop's ornate mitre, likening it to a lantern guiding lost souls. The assembled prelates shift with a collective intake of breath before tittering in unison, their ornate robes rustling like dying leaves. Cromwell's smile flickers in acknowledgement of the jest's precision. Humour here is a scalpel, carving both amusement and command. Throughout the hall, eyes dance in mirrored anticipation. A lady-in-waiting's fan flutters, as though fanning the sparks of laughter. Lamps catch the gleam of polished goblets, each sparkle punctuating the king's punchlines, like punctuation marks. The scene feels choreographed, an elegant ballet where every movement, every note of laughter is carefully scored. As the laughter subsides, Henry leans forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. A hush follows, and the hall leans in, savouring the rare intimacy. Cromwell inclines his head again, catching the king's eye with just the right blend of deference and camaraderie. There is a quiet exchange in that glance, recognition of wit shared and alliances affirmed. The banquet's rhythm resumes, a soft undercurrent of conversation, the gentle scrape of cutlery and the slow ebbing of laughter into satisfied smiles. Cromwell sits back, chest relaxed, eyes reflecting the flicker of torchlight. In this hall of splendor and subterfuge, the king's jests have woven a tapestry of power, one in which every chuckle is a thread binding courtier to crown, and every pause in laughter a space for ambition to whisper. When the serving tables are cleared and the last crumbs of spiced custard collected, the hall's torchlight dims just enough to veil the room in soft shadows. A hush falls, as if the stones themselves lean in to witness what comes next. The mask. Behind heavy velvet drapes, courtiers gather, transformed by costume into figures half of myth, half of whispered ambition. A clarion calls once soft distant, like a trumpet muffled by silk, and the drapes part. First step forth the nymphs, ladies draped in flowing gowns of pale green and silver, their hair entwined with fresh ivy and pearls that catch the dying light. Their sandals whisper on the polished floor, each step a gentle rustle like leaves stirring in a spring breeze. The ivy threads carry the scent of dew-slicked forest, a subtle reminder of both renewal and concealment. Behind them satties appear, men in russet doublets, masks of gilded wood carved with curling horns and pointed ears. Their tunics are trimmed with tufts of goat's hair, and their hooves, wooden hoof shoes, tap in measured cadence against the stone. A soft percussion that hums through the silent hall. The satties' masks bear fixed, mischievous grins. Yet behind each gaze lies an unreadable secret, a promise that every gaze is not quite what it seems. Angels follow in their wake, robed in translucent fabric that shimmers like dew in moonlight. Wings of quivering feathers arch from their shoulders, pale as moth wings, and their masks are smooth ovals of ivory, void of expression except for faintly arched brows and a gentle curve at the lips. They move with serene deliberation, their steps so slow and light that you might believe they hover above the floor. Cromwell stands at the edge of the stage, the drapes falling into soft folds behind him. In his hands he holds the saty's mask destined for his own face, a work of gilded wood, carved with delicate precision. The horns curl backward over his hair like slumbering serpents, and the mask's surface is polished to a muted glow. He lifts it to his face, sliding the straps into place, and the world shifts as the mask settles against his skin. The moment the mask is secured, Cromwell feels the charge of transformation. He steps forward, each footfall echoing in the silent hall, a solitary pulse of sound beneath the flutter of gauzy wings and the rustle of silk. The torchlight, softened by smoked-glass panes, casts his silhouette long across the floor, stretching him into a creature of myth, a satyr minister of hidden counsel. From this vantage, Cromwell observes the audience through the mask's narrow eye slits. He senses their gaze as a collective exhale, a slight tension as they adjust to a world where the powerful become symbols and the powerless dissolve into the draped shadows. In this mask, identity is woven from fabric and wood, and with it, the boundaries of speech and gesture blur. The nymphs whirl forward, silvered dresses catching pinpricks of light, and perform a slow, understated dance, arms raised in offering, hips swaying like reeds beside a river. Their movement is a silent language, each turn a stanza in a poem of coded messages. The satyrs respond in kind, footed steps that circle the dancers, boots stamping in measured repetition, as though tracing runes in space. Their masks smile sepulchrally, as though privy to some Indies jest. A hush deepens as an angel steps forward, voice raised in soft chant, words in Latin, dissonant and sweet, weaving through the rafters like incense smoke. The sound is neither ornate nor ornate. It's spare, deliberate, each syllable weighing as much as a promise or threat. You feel its echo in the soles of your feet, the way it vibrates against every carved beam overhead. In this woven tapestry of motion and murmured melody, secret messages pass from one masked figure to another. A tilt of the head, a flourish of the arms, a slowed breath that lingers like a question. Cromwell recognizes a furtive glance toward the Duke of Norfolk's seat, or a slight pause as a nod to the Queen's ladies. Each gesture is a word in a language spoken only through fabric and mask. When at last the dance concludes, the drapes reclaim the stage in a gentle swoop, and the candlelight returns to full brightness, revealing the courts as they were, a room of faces unmasked once more. The mask has woven its spell, the powerful have become symbols, and those without power have vanished into the silent wings. Cromwell steps off the stage, mask in hand, but the resonance of the performance lingers in every stone and tapestry, a reminder that in this court, even entertainment serves as the subtlest of parliaments, speaking truths that words alone could never convey. The dancers' gowns sweep around the polished floor, in gentle spirals, their hems tracing soft arcs like pen strokes on vellum. Music drifts through the hall, a quiet cascade of stringed notes that ebb and flow like a distant river. Candlelight flickers across the faces of the swirling figures, turning silk to molten hues of rose and gold. Cromwell stands near the edge of the dance, cloak draped over one shoulder, as courtiers glide past him in poised procession. The air carries a murmur of laughter, the soft rustle of satin against tapestry, and the faint tang of perfumed gloves. Each step seems measured to a slow, deliberate heartbeat, as though the dancers themselves breathe in time with the hall's collective calm. A noble woman approaches, tall, slender, clad in a gown of midnight blue brocade that shimmers with silver embroidery. Her presence is discreet, yet magnetic, like the final star lingering at dawn. As she passes within arm's length of Cromwell, the fabric of her sleeve brushes his cloak with a whisper-soft touch, a fleeting caress that carries a subtle hint of lavender and rosewater. Her voice, when she speaks, is scarcely more than a breath, soft as the flutter of a moth's wing. "Beware the wolf that wears the shepherd's cloak," she murmurs, eyes glinting with quiet mischief. "For hunger knows no loyalty." The words slip into Cromwell's ear, smooth and cool, landing like a silk thread in his mind. He inclines his head as the noble woman drifts away, her dance steps carrying her back into the circle of movement. Within her fleeting nearness linger the faint echoes of her words. Cromwell's pulse quickens, a small drumbeat at the base of his throat, as though her couplet has struck a chord deep within him. The dance continues around him, feet tapping, skirts swirling, but the world has narrowed to that single venomous phrase. He closes his eyes for a heartbeat, letting the music's slow rhythm soothe the sudden prickle of unease. Who, he wonders, is the wolf? Is it the predatory courtier who hides ambition beneath a humble guise? Or might the wolf be himself, lurking behind the dignified restraint of his own velvet cloak? The question drifts through his thoughts like a leaf carried by a gentle current. Cromwell exhales, the breath soft and measured. He imagines the noble woman's lips as they curved into that knowing smile, the quiet humor of her cryptic warning. There is a subtle observational humor in her words, the kind that acknowledges the perpetual dance of deception at court. He almost smiles at her cleverness, even as the words prick at his vigilance. The hall scent shifts as a breeze from the open doors stirs the torch's flames, drawing in the cooler night air. Cromwell breathes deeply, the crisp draught mingling with the warmth of the candles and the lingering perfume of the noble woman's passing. The memory of her breath, rosewater, lavender, hovers at the edges of his senses like a half-remembered dream. He opens his eyes, allowing his gaze to drift over the dancers once more. Their movements are now free of his disturbed attention, each footfall as light as a whispered secret. Yet for Cromwell, nothing feels quite the same. He makes a mental note of the couplet, filing it away under subtle warnings, just as he would catalogue a ciphered dispatch or a clandestine letter. In this realm, a clever rhyme can be as telling as any proclamation. The music swells gently, bringing the dancers to a pause, and the hall erupts in muted applause. Cromwell offers polite applause of his own, palms meeting in a soft, deliberate clap. The noble woman has vanished into the crowd, her identity masked by a swirl of finery and the flicker of torches. Cromwell stands still for a moment longer, cloak settling around him like a silent sentinel. He sips from his goblet of mead, the liquid sweetness a balm to steady his thoughts. Each swallow is a quiet vow to remain vigilant, to remember that in this court, even the gentlest of couplets can carry the sharpest of barbs. And so he tucks the whispered line into the folds of his mind, ready to unspool its meaning when the moment demands. A gentle hush falls over the hall as the last echoes of mask music fade, replaced by the soft rustle of silk and the distant murmur of departing courtiers. Cromwell lingers at the edge of the revelry, eyes drifting to a grand tapestry of hunting dogs, sleek hounds in mid-pursuit, their embroidered forms frozen in eternal chase. He remembers that behind this woven scene lies a secret exit, one known to few, but indispensable to those who traffic in whispered truths. With deliberate calm, he steps forward, the velvet of his cloak brushing the tapestry's edge with a muted sigh. You might notice the way the threads yield beneath his fingertips, the raised stitches catching torchlight like dew on morning fur. He presses a hidden catch, a subtle twist of metal concealed beneath the hem, and the tapestry swings inward, revealing a narrow door cut into the stone wall. A faint draught greets him, carrying the cool weight of night and the faint promise of escape. Cromwell slips through, the door closing behind him with a hushed click that dissolves into the distant hush of the evening. The corridor beyond is cloaked in shadow, lit only by the soft glow of a single lantern balanced on a wrought iron bracket. Its flame flickers in the breeze, casting elongated, quivering silhouettes across the uneven flagstones. The air here is cooler, tinged with the mineral scent of stone and the distant perfume of jasmine drifting through open arches. He follows the corridor's curve, each footfall softened by the dampness underfoot. The scent of jasmine grows stronger, mingling with the crisp night air to form a delicate veil that both soothes and sharpens the senses. You might feel the petals' ghostly touch on your cheek, as though the flowers themselves lean in to bear witness to the secret exchange about to unfold. At the courtyard's edge stands the Archbishop's emissary, a slender figure cloaked in midnight blue, face turned away as he studies hastily scrawled notes by lantern light. The emissary's quill, still poised above parchment, has left thick, uneven lines that speak of urgency rather than artistry. Cromwell's footsteps are silent in this muted realm, and he allows the emissary a moment's solitude before clearing his throat in gentle summons. The emissary turns, eyes widening momentarily at Cromwell's arrival. He tucks the quill behind an ear and folds the parchment, allowing the candle's glow to illuminate both men's faces in soft chiaroscuro. The courtyard around them is a world apart from the Banquets' opulence. Starlight glimmers on dew-wet cobbles, and the distant silhouette of a fountain murmurs as water spills into its basin. "Your Grace," the emissary whispers, offering a curt nod. His voice is hushed, as though even the night air carries secrets too heavy for daylight. He extends the parchment edges uneven, ink smudged by trembling fingers. Fresh intelligence, discovered in the Queen's own correspondence. Cromwell accepts the notes with a steady hand, feeling the rough grain of the paper beneath his fingertips. He inhales the jasmine again, letting its scent calm the pulse at his throat before skimming the lines. The code they contain hints at shifting allegiances in the north, names crossed out and rewritten with emphatic strokes, a map of intrigue more tangled than any tapestry. In the distance, a nightingale trills its melodic call, a gentle counterpoint to the weighty murmur of clandestine counsel. Cromwell files away each tidbit. The mention of a discontented earl, a cryptic reference to the midnight assembly, and an undercurrent of dread that tugs at his thoughts. Each line is a thread in a web he must untangle before dawn. The emissary steps back, hood falling to reveal solemn features faintly illuminated by star and lantern. "Speak softly," he warns, "for walls have ears, and the night has its spark." There is a subdued humor in his caution, as though both men share a private appreciation for the absurdity of snooping beneath their own roofs. Cromwell offers a brief, wry smile, folding the parchment with precise care and slipping it into his inner robe. "Your discretion is noted," he replies, voice smooth as still water. "Return to your quarters. I shall follow with instructions." As the emissary departs, melting into the night like a dark ripple, Cromwell remains alone beneath the stars. He tilts his head back, letting the cool air brush his face, and allows a slow exhale, an unhurried acknowledgement of the quiet power of secrets exchanged in darkness. The tapestry's hidden door and the starlit courtyard have served their purpose. Here, far from the masks and laughter inside, truths are bartered in whispers, and destiny is shaped one hushed step at a time. A murmur ripples through the corridors, like a slow spreading stain, quieter than a shout, yet impossible to ignore. Word has reached even the grand dining hall that one of the king's favoured courtiers collapsed without warning. Some blame his overindulgence at the feast, others whisper more darkly of the pox syphilis murmured behind gloved hands. In a place where reputation is as fragile as spun sugar, scandal travels faster than any royal decree. Cromwell remains seated at the side table, back straight, mask of composed calm barely shifting as the rumours coil around him. His gloved right hand drifts to his breast, where he keeps a small, perfumed kerchief, stamped with a discreet fleur-de-lis and scented faintly with lavender and rosewater. He hesitates, then lowers his hand, unwilling to brush even the suggestion of disease against unprotected skin. The kerchief remains tucked within the folds of his sleeve, its fabric as distant as a safeguard against invisible threats. You might notice how the air itself seems to thicken, carrying the faint scent of spilled wine, scorched wood from the hearth. And now a new, uneasy tang, half fear, half fascination. Footsteps echo in the vaulted corridor outside, a hushed cadence as dubious maids and anxious pages flit past, their eyes alight with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Their voices drop to a conspiratorial hush, too swift, too sudden. His favours at court, what will the king say? Cromwell's gaze drifts to the open window where dusk has slipped in, painting the stones in pale blue. A gentle breeze stirs the tapestry's edge, carrying in a whisper of jasmine from the courtyard below. He inhales, letting the floral note calm the tension rising in his chest. Even in the midst of peril, nature offers its quiet reprieve. From the hall beyond, a sudden cough punctures the hush, deliberate soundboard clear, designed to draw attention. A dainty lady-in-waiting stifles a laugh, then coughs again, more convincingly, as she clasps her silk sleeve to her lips. Guests glance her way, eyebrows arching in immediate suspicion. She straightens her posture, feigning concern, while the courtiers around her shift uneasily, some inching away, others leaning in, drawn by the lure of whispered scandal. Cromwell allows a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one born of subtle observational humour, at the theatre of human anxiety. Yet beneath that detached amusement lies keen awareness. Here, sickness is a weapon as potent as any blade. The pox weakens more than flesh. It unravels alliances, taints legacies, and rumbles the very foundations of favour. A page scurries in with a polished silver goblet of spiced wine. The colour of rich garnet, it releases a warm bouquet of cinnamon and clove, a curious counterpoint to the chill of fear. Cromwell accepts the offering with a slight nod, lips barely parting to let the mead's sweetness fill his mouth. He feels it soothe the dryness in his throat, a simple pleasure amid the undercurrent of dread. Throughout the hall, candles gutter in silent testimony to the evening's events. Their flames dance across painted ceilings, illuminating frescoed scenes of saints and martyrs who once faced far graver fates than whispered gossip. Cromwell glances upward, drawing an unspoken parallel. Truth and rumour are not unlike light and shadow. Each defines the other in equal measure. The steward approaches, voice low. "My lord, shall we summon the court physician?" He glances toward the errant coughs and pallid complexions now dotted among the guests. Or is this but idle fancy? Cromwell's eyes meet the steward's, steady and unflinching. After a moment's pause, he replies, voice soft yet precise. "Send for the physician, and quietly. We do not need a panic, only prudent measures." He inclines his head once, enough to convey authority without undue alarm. As the steward retreats, Cromwell's gloved hand finally brushes the perfumed kerchief, drawing it forth in deliberate calm. The faint scent of lavender rises and mingles with the hall's heavy aromas, a subtle balm to chest and mind. He folds the kerchief with measured care, the fabric's intricate fleur-de-lis pattern momentarily catching the candlelight. Outside, the night deepens, and the world beyond the palace walls slips quietly towards sleep. Within these walls, however, disease and rumour continue their silent dance, each whisper a reminder that, in Tudor England, the greatest peril often lurks, not on battlefields, but beneath the gleaming surface of opulence and favour. And for Thomas Cromwell, every silent exhale, every deliberate breath, is part of the delicate art of preserving both health and honour in a court where sickness and scandal share the same deadly currency. The corridor outside the great hall is quiet now, its torches guttering in steady rhythm as pages and servants have withdrawn. Cromwell stands before a small table draped in simple cloth, upon which rests a single vial of crimson liquid. The apothecary, a lean man with ink-smudged fingernails and keen eyes, offers it with a gentle flourish, as though presenting a rare jewel rather than an uncertain cure. The vial itself is slender, fashioned from hand-blown glass that shimmers with tiny bubbles trapped in the walls. Souvenirs of its making, sunlight, slipping through a high window, illuminates the elixir within, setting each droplet alight with a ruby glow. You can almost hear the liquid's soft promise, a guardian against unseen perils. Cromwell lifts the vial, his gloved hand steady. He turns it slowly, watching how the light fractures through the crimson depths. Each small rotation reveals a new gleam, a flash of vermilion, a deeper note of garnet. The apothecary's voice, low and measured, describes the tincture's virtues: mercury salts to purge corruption, arsenic tinctures to bolster the blood, and a blend of exotic herbs imported from the East to soothe fevered flesh. Yet, behind the apothecary's confident words lies the faint hum of risk. Mercury, so potent that only the slightest mismeasure brings tremors of madness. Arsenic, a delicate balance between tonic and toxin. And those exotic leaves and roots, their true effects known only in whispered legend. Cromwell inhales, the corridor's cool air mingling with the mingled scents of sulphur lamps and dried herbs that linger like shadows in the corner. He raises the vial to his lips but pauses, fingertips grazing the cool glass, as though seeking reassurance. Outside, a distant laugh drifts from the courtyard, a reminder that life beyond these walls continues in oblivious bliss. He tilts the vial toward the light again, noting how each drop clings to the sides before slipping back into the main pool, like cautious courtiers easing near the throne. The apothecary clears his throat, his eyes bright with professional pride. A single draught each morn, he suggests, and you shall find your constitution fortified against all manner of contagion. His words carry a soft observational humor, as though he too recognizes the precarious dance of hope and hazard in his wares. Cromwell considers the tincture in silence, allowing the hush to stretch, an unhurried interval in a world of swift decisions. He imagines the possible outcomes: a life shielded from pox's ravages, or a mind unraveling under the weight of heavy metals. The silence itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for his verdict. Finally, he tucks the vial into the inner pocket of his doublet, where it nestles against the fabric, like a secret guardian. The weight of the glass is reassuring, a tangible bulwark against the invisible menace. A prudent precaution, he intones, voice calm and even, though I shall await the physician's word before imbibing. There is no rebuke in his tone, only the quiet caution of a man who knows that the best defense is often measured restraint. The apothecary inclines his head, a flourish of relief in his gesture. He gathers his tools, mortar and pestle, phials and powders, each one carrying its own potential for healing or harm. As he departs, the faint jingle of glass against leather echoes down the corridor, a soft percussive note that underscores the uncertain promise of his craft. Cromwell stands alone for a moment longer, the crimson vial hidden at his side. He inhales deeply, the cool air brushing past the rush of spices that still lingers from the feast below. He exhales, the breath slow and steady, and allows himself a small, contemplative smile, a recognition that in this court, even health is negotiated in gambits of risk and reward. With measured steps, he resumes his journey to the king's private chambers, every footfall a quiet testament to survival's art, to embrace the promise of protection, yet never surrender to blind faith. In the hush of the corridor, the crimson elixir remains a silent companion, a small comfort against the relentless uncertainty of poison, pox, and peril. In the soft glow of the banqueting hall, the king's goblet rises in salute, its crystalline form catching torchlight like a captured star. A ripple of appreciation courses through the assembled lords and ladies as they lift their own vessels, a silent tide of "to your health." Yet, before the echoes of cheers can settle, a sudden disturbance fractures the calm. A guile-ladly lord, broad-shouldered and usually the very picture of courtly bravado, sways as the king's words fade. His chest heaves in a staccato rhythm, as though each breath must be bargained for. In a single, fluid movement, he raises one hand to his breastplate, fingertips pressing into the cool metal, then collapses forward. The sound is a muted thud, softened by velvet and brocade, but no less startling for its surprise. Goblets crash to the floor, crystalline fragments scattering like fallen stars. A gasp ripples through the hall, a collective inhalation that trembles in the torchlit air. You might hear the scrape of mahogany chairs knocked askew, the soft patter of skirts as ladies rise in alarm, and the distant clamour of guard boots, hastening steps echoing along flagstone. Cromwell's pulse accelerates, a quiet drumbeat behind the elaborate tapestry of noble concern. He moves with deliberate grace, cloak whispering against the floor. His first instinct is to aid the stricken lord, to kneel and check for a pulse, to press that perfumed kerchief to the pallid lips. Yet almost at once he hesitates, weighing another option, allowing the king's physician already advancing through the crowd to pass first. Every choice here is loaded with significance. To rush forward could imply doubt in the physician's skill, while stepping back might appear callous. In that fraction of a heartbeat, Cromwell's mind catalogues the course of action. A swift gesture that conveys both concern and respect for the court's established order. He settles on a balanced approach. He inclines his head in a subtle nod toward the physician. A wordless signal acknowledging his role, then positions himself just behind, ready to assist as needed. The physician approaches, robes flaring like dark lantern wings. Hands swift and certain. He places a firm palm on the lord's wrist, then another to the neck, seeking rhythm against the grain of noble flesh. Around them the hall holds its breath. Servants stand back, their silver trays clattering to stands, abandoned in the moment's gravity. Cromwell kneels slightly at the lord's side, dipping gloved fingers into a small vessel of water held by a trembling page. He wets a cloth and presses it gently to the noble's brow. The cool moisture, a whisper of relief. The metallic tang of fear laces the water, yet in its chill lies a semblance of comfort against the heat of panic. Soft, measured breaths fill the air, as the physician murmurs an incantation of diagnosis. Perhaps angina, perhaps something more dire. Cromwell watches, eyes steady but attentive, noting the physician's furrowed brow, the slight tightening at the corner of his mouth. In these small details lies the truth of peril. Illness, even in courtly guise, is a humbling equalizer. A lady steps forward offering a cup of clear broth, its steam curling into the hall's hush, like a silent prayer. Cromwell signals to a guard to hold the cloth's edge as the page brings it closer. He lifts the broth, with careful reverence, guiding it to the lord's lips. Each sip is laboured, yet the simple act of offering sustenance becomes a profound expression of empathy. From the high table, the king watches, his gaze discerning. A hair's breadth of movement, a nod of approval, a faint crease in his brow, signals whether Cromwell's conduct has matched the court's expectations. In this realm, compassion is never devoid of calculation. It is itself a statement, observed and recorded in the ledger of reputation. As the immediate crisis abates, the lord's breathing steadies, and colour returns in reluctant wisps to his cheeks. A collective exhale sweeps through the hall, like wind released from a drawn bow. Cromwell rises, brushing dust from his knee and straightening his cloak, his posture impeccable, relief mingling with the faintest smirk of subdued humour. In a court ruled by perception, every act, even mercy, becomes choreography. The physician steps back, offering a curt, professional nod. Cromwell inclines his head in return, acknowledging both the man's skill and the fragile balance of power and perception. As the hall's lightness slowly returns, broken conversations rekindling, goblets refilling, Cromwell remains poised, the echo of the collapse a reminder that here, every gesture ripples outward. In the silent harmony of restored calm, he understands anew that in Tudor England's court, survival demands not just wisdom, but the artful performance of compassion under the watchful eyes of history. A single, deliberate knock, soft as a falling leaf, resounds through the deserted corridor of Hampton Court. The torches lining the walls gutter in the still air, their flames flickering as though startled awake. Cromwell pauses mid-step, listening to the echo fade into silence. There is no echo of other footsteps, no whispered reply, only the hush of ancient stone and the gentle drift of candle smoke curling toward the high ceiling. A page, draped in a dark doublet that blends into the shadows, waits by a heavy oak door. In his hand is a small billet of parchment, sealed with the king's cipher, a circle divided by a rose and a fleur-de-lis. No crimson wax, no flourish, just the quiet authority of the sovereign's emblem. Cromwell takes it without a word. The page bows, his knees brushing the polished flagstones, and slips away on bare toes. Cromwell holds the billet before him, its edges crisp with the abruptness of the summons. His fingertips graze the seal, cool and unyielding. The parchment feels thicker than ordinary letter stock, as though imbued with the weight of destiny. He allows the billet to rest in his hand for a moment, inhaling the faint scent of old vellum and smoke, the echo of the king's presence lingering in each fibre. With a deliberate motion, he threads a slender dagger into his belt. The steel is cold against the warmth of his side, its edge concealed by a simple leather sheath. The reassuring click as it settles into place is a private affirmation. In Henry's court, readiness is as vital as favour. He barely notices the weight of the weapon, yet its presence offers a quiet comfort against the countless uncertainties woven into every midnight summons. Cromwell tucks the billet into the inner fold of his cloak, where it lies close to his heart. A silent flame of command. He steps away from the door. The only sound the soft swish of velvet and the faint, rhythmic scuff of his boots. Behind him the corridor remains deserted, galleries and chambers emptied of courtiers long since retired for the night. Only the pale glow of torches and the slow drift of their smoke mark his passage. He moves with measured pace, each footfall a quiet testament to caution. Moonlight slants through narrow windows set high in the walls, painting bars of silver across the floor. In their cool glow, Cromwell's shadow stretches long and lean, an unseen companion in the silent house. The air is hushed, yet heavy with expectation, each breath drawn a hushed promise of what awaits. At the corridor's end, a pair of guards stand at ease, their armor catching stray glimmers of torchlight like distant stars. Their halberds rest against their shoulders, the iron blades silent but ever vigilant. Cromwell nods once, an unspoken greeting, and they step aside, granting him passage deeper into the labyrinth of midnight corridors. With every step, the billet's presence grows warmer against his chest, as though the words penned with impulse, with latent command. The servant's quilted door slides open to admit him into a smaller antechamber, carpeted in rich tapestries that mute his approach. Here, the hush is more profound, as though the very air expects reverence. Cromwell pauses just before the inner door. He lifts his hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from his brow, and allows himself a brief moment of stillness. No flicker of doubt crosses his features, only the serene poise of a man who has mastered so many gambits of power that another summons is but one turn in the endless game. He pushes open the door, passing from anticipation into the realm of choice. Within, the candlelight reveals the silhouette of the king's private closet, a small chamber lined with dark wood and illuminated by a single brass lamp. Henry stands before a narrow window, light catching the sheen of his cloak's embroidery. Cromwell's heart remains steady, his breath calm. In the hush of this secret audience, the stakes are clear. Tomorrow's fortunes hinge on words spoken in the small flicker of candlelight, and the silent understanding that at any moment, favour may bloom or wither. And so, with steady foot and unflinching resolve, Thomas Cromwell steps into the midnight chamber, ready to meet the sovereign's will. The heavy door closes behind Cromwell with a soft thud, sealing him into the king's private closet. Torches in wrought iron sconces flare against walls hung with tapestries depicting Henry's past glories. The charge at Flodden, banners unfurled over captured castles, allegorical victories woven in gold thread. The air here is warmer, redolent with the smoky perfume of burning pine and the faint musk of aged wool. Henry VIII paces before the window, his royal boots clicking against polished marble floors in a relentless, measured rhythm. Each step echoes like a distant drumbeat, marking time through his mounting frustration. He stops at a particularly grand tapestry, St. George slaying the dragon finger curling around the edge, as though he might brush aside legend to confront the very breath of defeat. His voice, when it rises, is low but charged. Our alliances crumble like winter ice. France wavers, the Habsburgs grow silent, and all our treaties lie broken at our feet. The words tumble out in a controlled roar, resonant enough to stir the candle flames into jittering dance. You sense the heat of his temper, warm as the torches yet sharper, an inward blaze that scorches more than illuminates. Cromwell stands a respectful distance away, back straight, hands folded at his waist. His cloak hangs like a silent sentinel, and his expression is a mask of calm, serene as a still pond even as ripples of tension form beneath the surface. He inhales the dense air, allowing the scents of pine and aged tapestry to ground him. It is an anchor against the tempest of royal wrath. The king strides to a small desk, its surface strewn with maps and dispatches, inked parchments that tremble in their corners like leaves in a gale. He sweeps them aside in a single sweeping motion that sends a whisper of parchment sliding across marble. "Why," he demands, turning with royal urgency, "do those I trust falter when I call upon them most? Is it my will that crumbles, or the men who serve me?" Cromwell's gaze follows the sprawl of maps, noting the delicate folds where they have been consulted time and again. He allows a fraction of a heartbeat to pass before replying, voice measured, "Your Grace's will is as constant as the sun's course. It is others whose loyalties waver, drawn by fear or favour elsewhere." He bows his head slightly, a subtle sign of deference that also acknowledges the weight of sovereignty. Henry's boots click again as he returns to the centre of the room. He pins Cromwell with a sharp look, eyes bright with both anger and need. Then I require counsel that stands firm, words that do not shift like the sands of Calais. His tone is more contemplative now, less tempestuous, as though he seeks a lighthouse in the fog of failed alliances. Cromwell inhales, savouring the brief lull, the hush before the strategist's storm. He steps forward, each movement deliberate, cloak whispering against the marble. "May I suggest, Your Majesty, a re-examination of our bonds in the Low Countries? Renewed trade agreements will bind the Habsburgs more tightly than any treaty written beneath candlelight." He gestures to a folded parchment laid aside, the ink still fresh. Henry pauses, the heat of his anger cooling to a simmer of interest. His gaze drifts back to the tapestry of St. George. "A fitting parallel," he murmurs. "Slaying serpents requires more than swordplay." There is a flicker of a smile at the corner of his mouth, subtle observational humour that acknowledges both the parallels and the absurdities of his own metaphor. The king resumes his pacing, but now his steps carry purpose rather than turmoil. The tapestry's heroic figures seem to stir in their woven frames, as though leaning in to catch this exchange of fire for steel. Cromwell remains still, mind cataloguing each nuance. The way Henry's brow smooths when a solution surfaces, the shift in tone as rage yields to resolve. As the torches gutter in approval, Cromwell breathes in the softened torchlight and half smiles at the thought that here, in this small chamber of marble and tapestry, truth is both a salve and a sword, and knowing that a single word can save a kingdom or summon the scaffold, he offers the calm, unwavering counsel that only the shrewdest minister can deliver under the gaze of royalty. A soft thud resonates as Henry's heavy gold signet ring lands upon the polished oak table, its surface marked by centuries of similar thumps. The ring, broad and weighty as a man's fist, is engraved with the royal arms, the Tudor rose entwined with a fleur-de-lis. In that quiet moment, its echo settles like a heartbeat, underscoring the gravity of the next task. Before Cromwell lies a parchment, its edges curling ever so slightly, as though the paper itself recoils from the weight of authority. Inked in the king's stern hand, the commission bears words that test both sinew and spirit. The dissolution of yet another monastery. The vellum whispers beneath Cromwell's fingertips, the surface textured with the faint ridges of pressed embroidery, like the memory of prayers long spoken within those stone walls. Candles flicker in their gilded sconces, sending the parchment's curling edges into gentle relief. The wax-dripped floor bears witness to past emergencies, drops hardened into tiny mementos of haste and fervour. The air here is thick with the subtle perfume of alder smoke and leather-bound volumes, a calm counterpoint to the undercurrent of tension. Cromwell inhales, tasting the slight tang of tallow and ink in the air, then allows his gaze to drift over the commission's lines. Each clause is precise, yet laden with menace. Lands to be seized, assets appraised, obligations to be met. He imagines the abbey's cloistered gardens, once hushed havens of green, and now destined to become estates of state. In his mind's eye he sees stone walls tumbling, monks filing into street dust, and the keen wails of women whose livelihoods once depended on prayers in those shadowed corridors. A faint smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. Observational humour for a minister, accustomed to polite calamities. The notion that tomorrow's laughter in this chamber will be built upon the sorrow of others, yet he hides it, bowing his head in silent acknowledgement of the king's will. He uncurls the parchment and rolls it into a narrow scroll, the curl resisting like a spring under tension. Each rotation of the vellum is a reminder that policy can carry the slow burn of rebellion, whispered resentments in village taverns, clandestine petitions to sympathetic nobles, and the persistent throb of popular ire gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. Cromwell threads the scroll beneath his doublet's inner fold, where it rests against his side, a tangible emblem of duty and danger. He straightens, cloak settling around him like a sentinel, and allows himself one last glance at the ring, now gleaming with the king's cold light. Outside the door, a distant murmur drifts through the corridor, the soft cadence of guards shifting position, the muted scrape of boots on stone. It's a reminder that the world beyond these walls awaits every command etched in royal seal. Logistics will be his next battleground, dispatching commissioners to assess monastic inventories, negotiating the sale of gleaming chalices and leaded windows, appointing stewards to gather rents once pledged to prayer. He anticipates the tangled web of account books, ledgers marbled with ink stains, columns that must be rearranged, sums recalculated under candles' glow. The slow sigh of parchment turning will accompany nightly vigils as he catalogues each chapel's income, each field's yield, each friar's meagre allowance, and somewhere in that ledger's margins, the human cost will quietly accumulate, farms neglected, alms withheld, devotions displaced. Cromwell inhales again, savouring the corridor air that slips beneath the door. A cool respite tinged with night jasmine, he exhales, his breath steady and deliberate, an unhurried exhalation that anchors him before the storm of administrative upheaval. With one final, composed nod, he turns from the table and steps into the corridor's muted light. The ring's impression gleams on the oak surface, an unwavering seal of royal intent, while Cromwell's mind hums with the thousand details to follow. The petitions to draft, the tenants to placate, the king's coffers to replenish. In the hush of midnight's approach, he accepts the charge, ready to shape both policy and perception, knowing that in Tudor England's delicate tapestry, each deed undone is another thread rewoven by his own deft hand. A hush settles over the corridor as Cromwell pauses beneath the high gallery windows, where the pale moonlight filters in through narrow slits. The stone beneath his boots feels cool through the soles of his shoes, a quiet contrast to the sudden resonance that breaks the stillness, the tolling of bells from the tower below. Each clang falls like a judgment, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the night air. You can almost feel the vibration in your chest, a mournful drumbeat that carries the weight of a life ended, and a cautionary message to those who dare stray. One bell rings, deep and resonant, followed by another, then two more in careful sequence. Cromwell counts the strokes. 4, the number that signals a traitor's fall, and each stroke reverberates like a hammer on the anvil of conscience. The bell sound drifts upward, mingling with the faint scent of river mist that seeps through the gallery's narrow gaps. The Thames, unseen, murmurs in the distance, a soft counterpoint to the bell's grim pronouncement. You might notice how the night seems to lean in closer, drawing its breath in the pause between each chime, as though the very air absorbs the echo before releasing it again. Cromwell stands motionless, hands clasped behind his back, hooded cloak brushing the flagstones. His face is serene, yet his mind traces the rhythm of that final lament. He imagines the condemned man below, the heavy rush of last breaths, the coarse grate of boots on the scaffolding, the whispered prayers of chaplains, and the stifled sobs of onlookers. The blade's fall follows these bells in swift, merciless order, a final punctuation to a life's tale. A flicker of candlelight from a distant guardhouse glints off the tower's stone, and Cromwell's thoughts drift to his own precarious position. Favour, he knows, is as fleeting as the tolling echo. Mercy is rarer still, dispensed sparingly by the king's hand. Each bell is a reminder that one misstep, one misplaced word or misjudged alliance can shift the balance from authority to accusation, from patronage to peril. He inhales, the cold air filling his lungs with the scent of damp masonry and distant wood smoke. The bells toll again, and in the pause that follows, he allows himself a silent reflection. Those 4 strokes mark not only an end, but a warning, a dark refrain woven into the night's hush. The gallery's shadows lengthen as the final clang fades, and for a moment the world seems suspended between life and its cessation. Cromwell's fingers flex subtly, as though testing the weight of invisible chains. He recalls the faces of those he has seen led through these same gates, noblemen whose titles once gleamed like polished steel, now stripped bare to breathe final prayers. He remembers the stench of fear clinging to their tears, the chorus of grief and relief that followed. In this place, reputation is carved as indelibly as names on memorial stones. Here one stands immortal, here one falls into oblivion. As the bell's memory dims, the night regains its quiet pulse. A distant owl calls, a soft reminder that life endures beyond human drama. Cromwell exhales, the breath soft yet resolute. He turns from the gallery, shoulders squared against the weight of the tower's shadow. Each step away is measured, each footfall a testament to the fine line he walks between command and collapse. In the lingering echo of those tolling bells, Cromwell carries both caution and resolve, to serve with care, to speak with wisdom, and to remember that in the hush of midnight's darkest hour, the faintest sound can seal one's fate for eternity. The stone corridor beyond the tower's gate feels colder than the night itself, its walls damp with long-forgotten mists, and the soft drip of water echoing like distant footfalls. Cromwell stands before a small cell barred by thick iron grates, each vertical bar worn smooth by countless hands. Beyond them, a lone monk huddles on a rough pallet, his habit threadbare and stained with damp. The weak torchlight casts his gaunt face in stark relief, every hollow cheek and sunken eye socket accentuating the weight of his confinement. Through the grate, the monk's lips move in a silent prayer before he thrusts forward a scrap of parchment. The offering trembles in his grasp, fingers white at the knuckles, as though the act of passing it is itself an act of defiance or desperation. A faint scent of musty straw and stale sweat drifts from the cell, mingling with the sharper tang of cold iron. Cromwell leans in, listening to the monk's breath rattling like dry leaves in a windless chamber. "Read this, and beware," the monk rasps, voice low and urgent. His eyes shine with a fevered intensity that could be either plea or trap. "Norfolk will fall next." The words hang in the corridor's hush, as potent as any poison. Cromwell extends a gloved hand through the bars, fingertips brushing the coarse edge of the parchment. The paper feels brittle, its fibers stiff with age and moisture. He tugs it free in a single, unhurried motion, mindful that even this small contact could carry peril, ink to flesh or rumour to reckoning. The monk's gaze never wavers. It gleams with an unreadable light that suggests either prophetic clarity or calculated deceit. He withdraws the note and straightens, the cell's shadows retreating behind him. The corridor's silence swells, broken only by the distant drip and the monk's laboured exhale. Cromwell raises the scrap to his own torchlight, watching as the flicker reveals shaky script, 3 words penned with unmistakable urgency. "Norfolk will fall next." His heart, steady through countless crises, hammers once against his ribs. An echo of the tower's bells that tolled earlier. Is this a warning or another thread in the endless tapestry of courtly intrigue? He crumples the parchment into a loose fist, the crackle of paper a sharp reminder that information like paper can tear and fragment at the slightest misstep. The corridor's stones absorb the quiet crackle, as though they too lean in to understand the significance of the message. Cromwell inhales, the cold air filling his lungs with the scent of limescale and distant rain. In his other hand, he flexes the crumpled note, feeling the small weight of its knowledge, a burden more potent than any gold seal. He allows a faint, nearly amused smile to spread across his lips, the kind born from the realization that prophecy and poison often travel the same path. The monk's whisper lingers in the back of his mind. Norfolk, that ancient tree of nobility, felled by the axe of royal will or by the sharp edges of rumour. He can almost see the Duke's broad shoulders stooping under the weight of this unseen blade. Cromwell steps away from the cell, cloak whispering against the flagstones. He tucks the note into an inner pocket, close to where his heart beats. A private trophy of clandestine counts. With each footfall, the paper's presence pulses against his side, a steady reminder that knowledge is both gift and guillotine. Beyond the corridor, laughter and torchlight flicker in more public chambers, where triumphs and feasts go on oblivious of the shadows that gather here. Cromwell pauses at the threshold, glancing back at the cell's dark maw. The monk's form has shrunk into the gloom, but his eyes still gleam, vivid beacons in a sea of stone. Cromwell breathes in the cold air one last time, exhaling with quiet resolve. He moves on, the crumpled warning tucked away, ready to determine whether it is the harbinger of destiny or the next layer in a labyrinth of deceit. In the hush of midnight's embrace, he carries both the burden and the boon of this prisoner's whisper, knowing that in the days to come, it may shape the fate of dukes and the fragile edifice of favour. Cromwell steps through the arched gateway of the tower, where the night air greets him with a gentle nip and the distant breadth of the Thames murmurs unseen below. The torches flanking the entrance cast long shadows that dance across damp cobblestones, their flame-light flickering against ancient stone like a slow pulse. As he emerges into the courtyard's moonlit expanse, he senses a presence, a quiet weight of observation. A yeoman warder stands sentinel beside the gate, helmet visor tipped, just enough to reveal a pair of sharp assessing eyes. The keeper's ornate uniform, black and gold trimmed with Tudor roses, reflects the torchlight in small, deliberate glints. The warder's halberd rests at ease on the shoulder, its blade catching stray lances of light, a silent promise that these walls watch both the imprisoned and the free. You might catch the faint scent of polished leather mixed with moss and damp stone, the tang of centuries preserved in the guard's very posture. The yeoman's gaze shifts slowly, appraising Cromwell's fine attire, the rich velvet of his doublet, the subtle weight of gold chain, the neat fold of his cloak. In that steady scrutiny lies a question without words. Is it envy of privilege, or the unspoken respect due to one who bears the king's seal so often? The warder's stance is relaxed yet alert, veins bulging beneath gauntleted wrists, revealing a life accustomed to both ceremony and vigilance. Cromwell pauses, the torchlight catching the edge of his features, a half-smile playing at the corner of his lips. It is the sort of smile that recognizes the performance required of both prisoner and sentinel, a momentary acknowledgement that each of them serves a role in the tower's long drama. He straightens his shoulders, smoothing the fold of his cloak, and prepares to continue on his path. With a subtle nod, a courteous salute that neither demands deference nor offers subjugation, Cromwell resumes his stride. Each footfall is measured, but slightly quicker now, as if the guard's gaze has stirred a memory of the minefields that await beyond these walls. The cobblestone path yields a gentle echo beneath his heels, a calm percussion to accompany his passage back into the night's broader stage. Behind him, the warder's visor tilts fractionally more, the guard's eyes following Cromwell until the last slender silhouette disappears around a corner. The moment stretches in the hush that follows, a silent recognition that, here at the boundary of suppression and spectacle, every detail of bearing and attire is noted and remembered. Cromwell breathes deeply, drawing in the crisp air tinged with river mist. He exhales slowly, allowing the subtle tension of the encounter to dissolve like smoke. The night beyond the tower is a tapestry of shadows and distant light, leading back toward Hampton Court's labyrinth of intrigue. Each step forward is both a release from one theatre of power and an entrance into another. He smiles again, faintly amused by the warder's unspoken inquiry, a reflection of the curious symmetry between those who guard and those who govern. And as the moon glimmers on his cloak and the distant bells toll a late hour, Cromwell strides onward, ever mindful that in the courts of men, every gaze carries its own weight, and every step is a negotiation with destiny. The single candle perched on Cromwell's desk flickers against the walls of his small antechamber, its flame a lone sentinel in the gathering darkness. The air here is still, save for the soft hiss of melting wax and the occasional scrape of a quill being positioned for another round of entries. Beyond the heavy oak door lies the hush of night, but inside the world narrows to the narrow circle of candlelight and parchment. Before him lie stacks of musty ledgers and petitions, their leather bindings soft with age and use. Each journal crackles as he turns the pages, releasing a whisper of history, the musty perfume of old ink, mingled with the distant tang of tallow. You might notice the way the yellowed edges of the papers catch the glow, glowing like ancient leaves pressed between time's pages. Cromwell's right hand, gloved in supple leather, steadies a ledger open to columns of numbers, so fine they blur at the edges. His left hand holds a quill, its tip dipped in dark, viscous ink. He pauses, brow furrowed in the soft light, as though listening to the ledger's silent counsel. One misplaced mark here could unravel alliances abroad, empty the crown's coffers, or betray friends who have pledged their lives to his cause. He draws a slow breath, the candle's warmth brushing against his cheek, and tips the ledger slightly to catch a clearer beam of light. His eyes, keen as a hawk's, trace each figure and notation with unwavering precision. A stray smudge mars a critical entry, customs revenues from Calais misaligned by the slenderest fraction. Beneath it, the fate of hundreds of merchant houses, the assurances made to the king's ambassadors, and the trust of those who waited on his fidelity hang on a thread of ink. With deliberate care, Cromwell lifts his quill and sweeps aside the smudge, blotting it against a rough scrap of blotting paper. The soft rasp of quill on paper is a quiet counterpoint to the night's stillness, a metronome marking the passage of responsibility. He then redraws the figure precise and true, realigning the column so that order is restored to numbers that dictate nations' fortunes. As he finishes, the candle's flame flickers once, sending dancing shadows across the correspondence piled high to either side. Letters from distant governors, each bearing seals of wax in colours, denoting urgency, crimson for military dispatches, amber for courtly petitions, lie waiting for their turn. Cromwell glances at them, gauging their weight in the delicate balance of policy and persuasion. A gentle wind stirs the tapestry at the far wall, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from the courtyard below. Cromwell inhales, letting the fragrance clear the quickened beat of his pulse. Even victory, securing the king's will against faltering alliances, demands vigilance. Sleep is for the dead or the damned, and he is neither. He leans back in his chair, tucking a stray strand of hair behind his ear, and allows a moment's calm to settle like dust on old volumes. In the dim glow, he notes the worn edges of his gloves, the crease of his forefinger's knuckle where ink has stained the leather. These small details, traces of long hours and steady purpose, are as much a testament to his craft as the corrected numbers themselves. Rising, he stretches his shoulders and crosses the room to a narrow window set high in the wall. Moonlight, pale as sifted silver, washes over the ledgers and parchments, offering a silent promise that the night's labours will endure. He presses his palm to the cool glass, gaze drifting to the silhouette of Hampton Court's rooftop battlements against the starlit sky. Returning to his desk, Cromwell picks up the next petition, a plea from a widow whose son served in Ireland, and smiles faintly at the elegant looping script. Each petition, each ledger entry, is a quiet battlefield where alliances are forged or fractured. One more line to amend, one more plea to dispatch, and then perhaps the long watch can give way to dawn. He dips his quill again, the inkwell surface shimmering, and leans into the flicker of candlelight. Outside, the world sleeps. Inside, the Chancellor's vigil continues. Eternal, unwavering, the slow, deliberate rhythm that holds kingdoms together, one careful correction at a time. Beyond the soft glow of candlelight, the study's mullioned window frames a sliver of moonlit courtyard. Cromwell, seated at his desk, pauses mid-sweep of quill and ink. As a faint glint catches his eye, he tilts his head, examining the play of silver light against obsidian. There, just beyond the pale glass, a slender silhouette stands motionless, spyglass raised to his eye. The spyglass, long and gleaming, reflects the moon's cool beams like a sliver of starlight captured in brass. Is it a French agent dispatched under cover of darkness to glean the crown's designs? Or perhaps one of Norfolk's men, eager to chart Cromwell's next steps for the Duke's advantage? The questions drift through Cromwell's mind like autumn leaves on a midnight breeze. He inhales, the candle's warmth brushing his nostrils, then exhales a controlled release that steadies the sudden hammer of his pulse. In the silent hours, even the dark conspires. Each footstep in the corridor beyond the study door now seems amplified, every shifting shadow a potential threat. He closes his ledger with gentle care, the leather cover whispering shut like a secret. Cromwell stands, cloak whispering against the threadbare rug, and approaches the window. The spyglass remains trained on the desk, unwavering as a watchful sentinel. He notes the figure's posture, lean shoulders hunched against a chill wind, delicate hands steady on the instrument. The spy's breath hangs visible in the night air, a faint mist illuminated by the moon, each exhale a soft punctuation in the hush. Behind Cromwell, the scent of beeswax mingles with the musty aroma of old parchment, and somewhere beyond a distant hearth crackles in gentle conversation. But here in this threshold between light and dark, tension hums like a taut string waiting to be plucked. Cromwell senses the silent thread of observation stretching between him and the spy, a tenuous line unspooled in the moon's soft glow. He raps the window's frame once, lightly enough to avoid alerting the watcher, firmly enough to summon action. The spy freezes, silhouette stiffening as if petrified in silver relief. A heartbeat passes, and Cromwell turns away to retrace his steps to the door. His boots whisper on the worn flagstones, each step deliberate, each breath measured. He finds a page, a boy of slight build and keen eyes, paused in the corridor, lantern held aloft like a solitary star. With a quiet gesture, Cromwell beckons. The page approaches, quick but unhurried, ears tuned to every rustle of drapery. "Post a warder at the north window," Cromwell instructs, voice calm as a murmur of silk. The boy's eyes widen in understanding, no further words are needed, and he slips away with the same silent grace that marked the spy's approach. Cromwell returns to the window, heart settling into its steady rhythm. In the courtyard, the spy has vanished, either driven off by the swift arrival of the guard, or melting into the maze of shadows that embrace the tower's walls. The mullioned panes now mirror only the candle's flame behind him, and the moon's light spills coldly across the study floor. He allows himself a small, nearly imperceptible smile. The silent humor of a game where every whisper, every glance can shift the balance of power. Even in these hidden hours, the court's intrigues refuse to rest, weaving their threads through corridors and courtyards alike. Cromwell draws a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of wax, parchment, and damp stone. He returns to his desk, the spyglass's memory glinting at the edge of his mind, a quiet testament to vigilance. In the stillness, he dips his quill once more into the inkwell, the ink's dark promise ready to record both truths and countermoves. Outside, the night resumes its quiet vigil, and within the study, Cromwell resumes his watch. For in Tudor England, even victory demands vigilance, and as long as the dark conspires, the long night watch is never truly done. The hush of the long night lingers as Cromwell sits motionless at his desk. The single candle's flame wavers, its wick nearing its end, and he hesitates before reaching to snuff it out. Outside the narrow window, the sky's ink-dark expanse begins to soften, a pale whisper of light brushing the horizon where the Thames slumbers. He lays aside his quill, its shaft stained with ink and bearing the curve of 1,000 strokes. The blotter lies nearby, dotted with dark smudges that mark small salvations in the sea of bureaucracy. His shoulders, once held with the readiness of a man expecting every surprise, sag slightly now, an echo of the hours spent navigating petitions, commissions, and conspiracies. The weight of parchment, momentum of ink, and the unceasing parade of urgency have worn him thin. The study is quiet, save for the soft groan of floorboards settling, and the faint creak of the tapestry's folds as a gentle draught stirs them. On the polished surface of his desk, the ledgers lie open like the pages of a worn atlas, each entry a marker of lives altered by the Crown's will. A half-drunk cup of watered wine sits untouched, its thin broth reflecting the first lean beams of dawn. Cromwell stands and moves to the window, hands resting on the sill as he gazes out. The courtyard below is half-shrouded in mist, its cobblestones gleaming faintly with the dew of night. Slender tree branches sway in the breeze, and in their midst the soft trill of a morning thrush rises, a delicate counterpoint to the burdens of the past hours. The bird's song weaves through the quiet, a gentle reminder that life persists beyond ledger lines and royal decrees. He breathes in deeply, the cool air filling his lungs with the scent of damp stone and fresh blossoms from the palace garden. A faint warmth on his cheek tells him the sun's edge has slipped above the horizon. The sky transforms in brushstrokes of rose and gold, colours so subtle they feel as though they've been whispered by the dawn itself. A slight smile touches his lips, observational humour for a man who has spent the night in the company of ink and intrigue. The dawn's promise feels ironic. Tomorrow's light will bring its own demands, new audiences to pacify, fresh letters to draft, and battles fought not with swords but with wit, will, and unwavering survival. Yet for this one moment, he allows himself the stillness of reflection. He turns from the window and retrieves his cloak, the wool cool against his fingertips. As he drapes it over his shoulders, he surveys the room, torches embers in iron sconces, ledgers closed, and stacked with careful precision. The quill returned to its stand. Each detail bears witness to a night's labour, the silent testimony of a minister's vigil. Opening the door to the corridor, Cromwell steps into the soft glow of dawn's early light filtering through high arches. Pages and servants stir, yawn and exchange hushed greetings. Caught between night's retreat and the day's approach, their movements are slow, reflective as though they too sense the fragile tranquility before the court reawakens. Cromwell allows a final, steadying breath. In the distance, a church bell tolls the first hour, its sound rippling across the courtyard and into the hush of dawn. He straightens, shoulders squared once more, eyes bright with calm resolve. Each toll is a summons not just to time, but to the unending dance of governance, of alliances renewed, favours negotiated, and the perpetual quest to remain both indispensable and unassailable. As the sun's rays spill across the stones, Cromwell steps forward, his stride measured and sure. The garden's birds continue their chorus, a gentle reminder that every ending is also a beginning, and that in the soft glow of dawn, even the heaviest burdens can find new purpose under the promise of a new day. And so, our long day at Henry VIII's court draws softly to its close. We began before dawn in shadowed chambers, tracing Cromwell's whispered prayers over damp stone and wax-scented parchments, We watched him navigate the flash of scarlet cloaks and the hush of chapel hymns, slipped behind velvet drapes into Anne Boleyn's scented salon, and felt the weight of gold coins exchanged beneath carved oak. We lingered at the great hall feast, where peacocks gleamed like frozen stars, and every toast carried its own gambit, then slipped out to secret exits under starlit arches, trading whispered truths in jasmine-perfumed courtyards. At midnight, we knelt beside the tower's echoing bells, and rose again to the long night watch, marking every ledger line and shadowed suspense by candlelight. Each moment, a furtive glance through a spyglass, a quill's correction in the quiet hours, the soft clang of royal seals, has been a gentle invitation to lean back, breathe deeply, and let Tudor England's rhythms cradle you. If tonight's journey through harems of intrigue and pages of power stirred your curiosity, there are many more tales awaiting beyond these palace walls. From the slums of Victorian London's East End to the streets of ancient Rome, our channel is your companion for slow, immersive histories that soothe the mind even as they spark wonder. Rest now. Let the distant echo of the tower's bells blend with your steady breath. A flicker of torchlight soften into calm dawn. Feel the court's long memory settle like a quiet lullaby as you drift between past and present. When you're ready for the next chapter, tap into another video, perhaps the hidden prayers of medieval nuns, or the dawn patrols of Tudor archers. Each story is crafted to guide you toward calm reflection and gentle discovery. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next tranquil passage through time. And if tonight's tale left an imprint in your thoughts, share in the comments which moment lingers brightest and where you're joining us from this peaceful hour. Thank you for keeping Tudor England's royal court spirits alive. This twilight hour, here, every whispered conspiracy becomes a lullaby. Sleep well, until our next gentle adventure.